Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 34. The Next Generation Season 7, Episode 6. Phantasms.
I am curious. What do my nightmares mean?
I believe you are experiencing a classic dismemberment dream. Or, in your case, being a mechanical man, a dismantlement dream.
I do not understand.
Your mechanistic qualities are trying to reassert themselves over your human tendencies. Ego and id struggling for domination. The workmen symbolize the ever-present id constantly working to destroy the ego. Or the image of Counselor Troi, a female, is devoured by you, clearly indicating an unconscious desire to possess your own mother.
But I do not have a mother.
Do not interrupt. The knife, in its violent connotation, suggests a certain feeling of sexual inadequacy.
But I have no sexual desire.
Ah, impotence on top of everything. It is all becoming clear to me now. There might be a paper in this.
How long do you think it took them to build all those extra hallways for this episode?
I think it's the same hallways.
It's not they don't have extra hallways.
Yeah, at the beginning they were walking down some long hallways. I mean, do you think they always?
It's just a big circle.
You think they always have those hallways all built up like that?
They do actually.
Because it's like a big arc, I think.
Is it because they usually just have a stationary shot of the hallways, but this one they actually followed. Usually it's always stationary, but they followed them. They did a first person, an FPS style.
I think there's a bit of wraparound
or a third person style,
so they can get all the rooms.
They probably had some fellas pick up the set and just sort of scurry real fast.
Do you think they moved the set along with them? Like that? Maybe they just had a big thing. Maybe it was like a Jamiroquai video. Do you think they ever had them run the same part of the hallway just from different angles so it made it look longer?
Of course, yes. I don't know this, but I believe it.
Well, you don't think there were extra? Have you all seen the hallway setup they have built?
I seem to remember from some set picture or something that they have a fair amount.
Yeah.
So they could snake around a little bit here and there.
So do they just keep it built all the time? How do they lease that space to always have hallway? I mean,
it's a movie studio.
Yeah, but don't other movies need to use stuff there too?
No, the standing sets of the show are the standing.
You can get a lot out of a corridor, filming it from different spots and like across.
But I'm
one
saying
side of it.
Okay, but then when
side.
they're done filming and they have to film the new episode of Rescue 911 or whatever,
that's done elsewhere.
They kept their soundstage or whatever.
Yeah, you get. I this is purely from recollection from reading the captain's logs and the Star Trek encyclopedia and all that. But yeah, my understanding is they have the standing sets, which are the bridge and certain engineering. Yeah. They have certain sets that are just always around, right? And then they have space for the extra fun time, styrofoam rock, strange planet, Romulan office building.
Do you think they actually have like multiple transporter rooms, or do you think it's always the same?
Nah, they have one. They have one. They have one, even though O'Brien's favorite transporter room is transporter room 3, according to Captain Picard.
So they're all modeled after 3. Well, all one of them is modeled after 3.
They probably shift something around. I know they have the panels on the walls and things can be replaced and moved around, so they can do a lot to make things look different. But if it's like a lot of
modular.
Yeah, exactly. It's modular.
So then what's that spot in the opening when you see the very top and there's people all walking around and you can see it in the credits? Is that 10 forward? Just people all, or is that the
10
bridge?
10 forward's already at the front. I think the bridge is
theoretically
at the top.
Yeah.
Well, does that top...
And that was drawn with, I think, like watercolor pencils or something. They animated the people walking with little crayon type things.
Is that what they were? Little crayons? Well, the bridge doesn't have windows going all around it, although I guess maybe if you take into account
the hallways outside of it,
the captain's ready room, and then the or no, the ready room and the captain's ready room, and then there's
like the
conference room, which is called something else. I don't know.
And then there's the two bathrooms, the one that's just for pissing and the one that's for miscellaneous.
So it's not divided by men and women. It's divided by PP and miscellaneous.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah.
Everybody, all alien races pee. What the other things they do, miscellaneous.
You got to be careful with that miscellaneous one. It gets pretty sketchy sometimes. So that whole part at the top then is the bridge. The bridge is at the top.
Yeah, I guess so, but now you're freaking me out, and I'm gonna have to go look at the.
I'm freaking out.
I'm gonna have to go look at my Star Trek.
I would think
engineering manual.
It would be cool if it was 10.
Michael Okuda.
It'd be cool. It'd be cool. If, I guess it's not, but it'd be cool if that was 10
Denise
forward
Okuda.
because that would be like. Do you remember when there was Caldor in Seven Corners and it had the and this
Caldor.
I remember that.
Yeah, and it had a restaurant at the top.
It was like where the Lord and Taylor was.
Yeah, the Lord and Taylor. Yeah, the restaurant, the spinning restaurant on top.
Yeah, and that's common. That's not an uncommon thing to have a restaurant with windows all around at the very top.
Yeah, and especially from that era of the 80s.
Which is when this show was sort of,
And what show are we talking about, Dan?
Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Good, and I really enjoyed the where you put the emphasis on where the the emphasis on those syllables. I was explicitly trying to avoid making that joke.
And you accidentally
not
made
much
that
of a joke.
Nothing can possibly go wrong.
Anyway,
first thing that's ever gone
welcome to the It's Got Star Trek podcast.
Everybody's wearing fake mustaches.
Are we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm wearing it on my butthole.
This is episode 34.
I got a
think?
fake mustache on my butthole.
Episode 34, where we will, in short order, be discussing Phantasms, the sixth episode of the seventh season of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
What episode of It's Got Star Trek is this?
34.
34. Wow.
34. 34.
Whoa, and this is season 7, episode 6. 7 times 6 is 42.
Yeah, I know.
And we've had 34. If you reverse that and subtract 1, you get 42.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's some numerology right there.
Yep, that's how numerology works.
All right.
doesn't.
Real quick, before we get into the meat of the discussion, which I can tell you guys are champing at the bit to get started.
Phantasms.
Jesse in particular, because Jesse's been begging us
Don't bury the
to do
lead.
this episode for a long time. Am I burying the lead? I was just going to go over some user comments.
No, I was just
audience comments.
You said champing the bit, and so I was like, that's one of those things that people say wrong, and burying the lead, people say that wrong too.
All right, so then I'll proceed with the comments. Well, first of all, I want to thank Tarek. Tarek left us a nice review on Podchaser.
Thanks, Tarek.
And
You're cute.
just a reminder, if you don't have an Apple device,
for cute.
iTunes reviews they're a hot commodity out there in the podcast world. But Podchaser's trying to give it a go. So if you're an Android or a PC user or Linux, or if you listen to the podcast through
None of those things.
some sort of other bizarre
What are you
mechanism.
talking about? What are you talking about? Podchaser?
Podchaser. Podchaser. They're kind of an up and coming go-getters. I don't know. I don't really know.
What made
much
you
about
think of Podchaser?
Pod Racer?
well,
Now
it's,
this
it's,
is Podchaser.
no, it's
Now this is Podchaser.
I was just
Whoa,
looking for
what does this
alternatives.
button do?
We had many people contact us and say that they wanted to leave us a review or a rating,
Fucking hate us.
but that they weren't on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever it's called these days.
I'm definitely sympathetic.
Yeah, so
empathetic.
You can leave stuff on Google.
I'm
You
empathetic.
I think you can leave reviews everywhere, but I don't know. It's not something I care that much about. But I'm told at all the secret podcaster
reviews all over the
conferences. You know the podcasting version of the Bilderberg group, when they get together, they're always like, yeah, you got to ask for ratings and reviews. Ratings and reviews. Anyway,
Like and subscribe.
Podchaser is an option. And then just a couple of comments from folks.
So Podchaser is a good one. That's an alternative to iTunes.
I don't know. I've heard that.
But in the secret Illuminati podcast circle, they say
got-
that
it's got Tarek
They
on it.
say
It's one of the they're
it's got Tarek.
it's got Tarek. That's going to be our new podcast. It's going to be an awesome one.
It's all about Tarek.
But okay, a couple comments from last week. So as a reminder, last week we watched Wink of an Eye from Star Trek the original series, third season, which was an entertaining episode with a bunch of fast people trying to steal semen from the Enterprise crew. And
That's what it was.
and we put up a couple of funny pics and highlight clips and stuff, and one of them was a clip of us talking about the physics of the show, which was slightly bizarre since the speed of light, or the speed of phasers I should say, Dan calculated out using evidence from the show to be 112 miles per hour.
Well, no, that's I didn't calculate that. What I did is I looked on the internet and I found that a lot of people had calculated it to be that way, based not upon, because the manual says it's light speed, but then people are like, well, I slowed it down frame by frame and measured how far the beam went frame by frame. And contrary to what it's supposed to be, if you go by what you see on the screen, it works out to around 112. Other people had other numbers around that area. And other people at minimum said it seems to be a lot slower than light speed.
Well, and also the theory of relativity and would suggest that you could not dodge a light. There's not possible to dodge a light speed beam, even if you are a sped up human being.
Right.
You would be sped up to the point where you were exceeding. Never mind. That was last week anyway.
It's silly.
But we mentioned, we were talking about the curious physics of Wink of an Eye, and Kyle Powell said the only curious physics I was ever concerned with in the episode was what was holding that outfit together.
Oh, ha cha 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 cha!
We have a lot of variations on this theme in the comments.
It was a pretty ridiculous.
I think she was probably wearing a top and a bottom, like a bikini kind of thing, and then they just had a button that sort of went around the side, like a second piece that was like a sideways sash or something, or not a sash, but a sideways blouse.
Yeah.
They took a blouse and turned it, not a blouse.
It was the 60s.
What do you call it? Like a cape. It was like a cape that instead of going on her back, went on her side, and instead of letting flow free, it kind of buttoned on her left hip or something.
And at
or one of her hips.
After they finished shooting, somebody got to unbutton the button and rip it off.
Yeah, that's what they got to do.
That's how it worked in the 60s.
Well, the same person, Clyde Powell, noticed that, because I commented that they seem to put a lot more effort into the women's outfits from the Scalosian women than the men's
Pelosian.
outfit. Yeah, and he posted a picture of the Real, the male Scalosian standing next to Dila. And you can it really accentuates the difference in the level of costuming with the kind of
He's just
beautiful
has
dress.
like a shiny outfit.
He has a shiny. He looks like tinfoil. Like the costumer was like, "Oh no, we forgot to put together a costume for
Funny
this guy."
shoes.
Real Madrid.
But to support your earlier comment and last week's comment about the physics, Dan, Eddie Klein says that particular error in terms of the Dila being able to dodge a phaser beam could well be the single worst science error in all of Star Trek. And you know what? My immediate reaction was like, well, I don't know. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, I don't know if I can think of. I know some are fantastic. Warp drive, of course, but there's some logic behind it. There was no logic behind, this person is sped up so fast they can just dodge a laser beam.
It's like they were just trying to sort of like instill upon the observer the fact that they were going slow and they could do all this fucked up shit because things are different here because it's slow, like your phasers. But they didn't actually take the time to write it out on a piece of paper. Like they were just like, well, this could happen and that'll show people that things are moving at a different speed. Right. It's like, just write a few things on paper as you're saying that and then read it back.
Just use your words.
And see where it is you're going with that.
Use your big boy words.
That's kind of funny that
well, and
then
Gary L. Steiger, he noted, I always thought this was a little weird. After Kirk realized the nature of his situation, I would have stood much closer to the target. 12 inches or so, and tried again at a later date. Because it's true. It's like, she dodged that from across the bridge.
Right.
Just do it later.
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of hugging up on her later. Anyway. That was just pointing out that there were some, as we noted last week, some logical inconsistencies with what was otherwise an entertaining episode.
The joke always is, it's like, oh, it's just a movie, it's just a TV show. It's like, oh, those nerds nitpicking. At a certain point, though,
this is Star Trek.
Regardless of what it is, at a certain point, it's just like, come on, man. Come on.
Rob Cohen, who I believe has commented before, he wrote a very nice long comment, but the key thrust of it was that this was one of the few times it's made explicit, or relatively explicit, that Kirk actually slept with the woman. There are, that we've talked before about how this reputation Kirk has for being he's just sleeping with all these women left and right. When you actually watch Star Trek, it does not happen nearly that often. And a lot of times, as Rob Cohen is pointing out, it's maybe implied or hinted at, or maybe there's a romance hinted at. But in this case, I mean, he's pulling his boots on. That's what Cohen is pointing. He's pulling his boots back on. You see her go at him, and then the scene cuts, and when they come back, he's all sitting down, pulling his boots up, and she's all straightening her hair. That's pretty extreme, particularly for this era.
Yeah, there's not much else to be taken away from that than they had sex.
And I got to thinking, I was reading all these comments, and on one of the Facebook groups, somebody had put up a quiz asking how many. It was 2 questions. How many kids does Kirk have, and how many survived? And they're looking for, David and all the, but it suddenly, having just watched Wink of an Eye, I thought, wait a minute, Kirk did sleep with Deela, and that was sort of her goal. And she could have an accelerated Kirk baby.
Accelerated Kirk baby.
There's nothing, they don't address that at all in the episode, but the logic of the episode suggests her goal was to secure Kirk to mate with him. And she did. And so maybe there's a young Kirk who lived for a brief time on the Scalosian planet.
Maybe she wasn't ovulating yet.
Very brief.
Isn't that how it works with women? If they're not ovulating yet, they're immune to babies. That's how women work, right?
That sounds. What did that crazy Republican senator say?
Oh, God.
If it's a legitimate rape, the body has a way of just shutting that.
Oh, that's right.
That's so gross.
Shuts it down.
Ugh.
Anyway,
I forget that guy's name.
All right, so that's enough for last week, and now we'll move on to this week. Phantasms, which, as we've already discussed, starts out with a really creepy dreamlike walk of Data, making his way, meandering through the Enterprise corridors.
Yeah, all the dream bits in this are really great. They're like,
Do you know who this was directed by?
I know that it was produced by Ronald D. Moore.
This was directed by Patrick Stewart.
No fake. Oh, it's funny because he got to be all annoyed by some trivial shit. It's always funny when Picard's all annoyed by some trivial shit. He was a real scamp, avoiding parties. He was all bummed about it, and Riker thought it was great that Picard was all pissed off.
Well, it's a really tricky line to walk because Picard has simultaneously made it clear that he absolutely does not want to go to this admiral's banquet that he's been invited to.
He's never wanted to go, and I guess the whole time he's been the captain of the Enterprise, he's been able to get out of it because he's actually doing some adventures and stuff.
But on the other hand, he also is horrified at the concept that he might be viewed as trying to wriggle out of going.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? So
he's trying to keep some dignity about it, I guess.
So Picard, this whole episode, is getting all worked up, and it's because there's that tension between, on the one hand, he's not going to be sad if he misses the banquet, but on the other hand, he desperately wants to prove that he's like, I'm doing my due diligence here.
Right.
I'm doing everything I can to try to make it. I'm not trying to,
Because Nakamura's getting all mad.
Yeah.
Well, it sucks if you get, blamed for something that, you weren't trying to do. I mean, just because you happen to enjoy the results doesn't mean you're going for those results. But I mean, I guess they never did make it clear if in the previous ones he was specifically trying to avoid it, but probably not. I mean, it's Picard. He's not going to try to skirt his responsibility.
I mean,
he wasn't there that episode where they did the scan on the Enterprise and Picard had to go back and get a saddle. And he got Data to do small talk with those guys. So he did sort of push Data off onto that guy, but that wasn't avoiding anything.
Picard
was still being responsible, and he was like, well, these two small talk. I can enjoy this hilarious situation that allows me to get away from it while also maintaining, the status quo on it.
Picard will do what he will use clever tricks to get out of stuff, I think, but only in a legitimate way. In other words, I think it comes down to the previous 6 times that he was invited, right? He didn't have to go because he had a sufficient enough excuse. Now, he probably could have made it. He's Captain Picard. He has a lot of sway, depending on, he's not always dealing with an anomaly or some sort of Klingon rights of succession or something. That's not every week, right? That's some weeks. So he could have been far enough away where he had a justifiable reason to be like, oh, you know what? Just unfortunately, we got to map this galactic cluster, and we could take a break, but it would really be inappropriate. I don't want to mess with my scientist or something. But this time, he really wasn't in that position. He was close by, and he didn't really have a lot of excuses.
And Geordi offered to, speed up the progress, and then, of course, Picard is like, no, I wouldn't want to endanger the ship. It's like, that's a viable excuse, right? But what was it? Weren't they saying they were going to tow his ass in there if he, it's like, you need us to tow you in here, And that's, of course, there's no dignity to that at all, right? Yeah. So I guess technically maybe they could have done that, but maybe at that point they were just like, okay, he's got a whole report and everything. I mean, they've just discovered some new species that we can, study now, so I guess that's a good enough reason to miss this fucker.
By the end of the episode, Picard is back to being really happy and confident because he A, got to miss the banquet, and B, has lots of documentary evidence as to why he did. He's like, oh, it was a whole brand new crazy nonsense, man. It was fucking nuts. You wouldn't believe this, Admiral Nakamura. I'll tell you about it at next year's banquet.
So Patrick Stewart directed this.
He directed this, and I think
has he directed many others?
He did. I think he did. I have to double check. He didn't start doing directing until a little later on in the series. Frakes and Dorn and Burton, I think, all directed earlier on. Frakes in particular.
Yeah,
but what I saw in this, the Patrick Stewart direction, what he brought to it. My impression of what he brought to it anyway, was this interesting melding of sort of filmic language with very theatrical staging, which makes sense given his experience as a theatrical actor. And by that, I mean, to draw your attention to things like in the dream sequences, he uses different lenses and all sorts of special effects, combined with the music and stuff to make it feel very dreamlike. You're like, ooh, I'm like in some unsettling, disturbing dream.
Yet there's a lot of unsettling music that goes on.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if you look at how all the actors are staged, the blocking is like really, really like static and very like overtly choreographed. Not like a normal TV show. Of course it's choreographed, but it's made to seem not choreographed, right? But in the dream sequences in particular, Riker and Crusher are right over here, and then Worf is over here.
Over in the corner.
Yeah, and people are always and the where people are is with very, very stage like. So I don't know. I might be reading too much into that, but that was sort of the impression that was coming.
Yeah, I can dig that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the part. Oh yeah. So when she all had the straw in Riker's head,
slurping out some cellular peptides.
Yeah,
Alaskan cellular peptides.
When she goes, do you want some? It's delicious. And it's like she's like looking straight at him while she goes back to sipping on the straw. That was a really sort of surreal, bizarre scene, but that made me think, because they were definitely sort of facing Data the whole time in that sort of image, and the shot was very sort of, they were very still. There was two shots of Data where they opened up his stomach and he had a telephone.
Yeah.
The first one was in engineering, and I don't remember if they got the telephone. I guess they got the telephone from there. Anyways, but when they did a close up, there was very obviously like an arm. It was supposed to be Data's arm grabbing the phone or whatever.
Somebody else's.
It was somebody else's, and I was sort of wondering, are they off to the side? It's like, no, there's somebody standing behind there. If you look closely at that close-up shot, you can tell there's someone standing behind there. Whereas in the second one, you can tell it was like a mannequin when they did a close-up. It was very obviously a mannequin kind of thing. Well, I thought going back to the hallways again, like they never do that. I
dig the hallways.
They don't do that often, where they follow them like sort of third person or whatever as they're walking down the hallway. Usually it's all sort of a still kind of shot.
This whole episode is a series of,
in the show anyway,
a series of familiar things that you're seeing in a different context, which adds to the unsettlingness, right? So first of all, the hallways, as you noted, we see the hallways like for a long time, and they're all like, the camera angles and lenses are all like wobbly and woobly. So that's disconcerting. We see Picard out of sorts, as we've discussed. The guy we're used to seeing in command, even in the most dire of situations, even under torture, is coming apart at the seams and acting like a lunatic in engineering and hassling Geordi and stuff.
That's when even Geordi had to like push his hand away. Because Captain,
and it's all because of it. It's all because of an awkward social situation that he's enduring, right? And so that's something we're just not used to seeing there. But the other thing that really struck me was, you see this opening sequence, and it's clearly meant to evoke a dreamlike state, right? All the television language, the movie language that's being employed is this is a dream. Yet it's still shocking when Data like opens his eyes and sits up in bed. Because you don't see Data sleeping in bed. It's a weird thing for Data to do. It's yet another thing. And then, of course, we can talk about it in a bit. We have Geordi in a role reversal of his own, where he's the one being sort of harassed with unwanted advances.
That was unexpected.
Yeah,
he's never on the same page with women.
Yeah. So this was an interest. There's a lot of flipping around in terms of who's in power versus who's not in power, and all that.
Geordi was seemed the most excited about anything in all of Star Trek during one of the dreams at the very beginning. He goes, "This is going to be a lot of fun." And I'm like, Geordi doesn't get excited about shit.
Well, okay. what I love that's right at the beginning, and it's really good direction by Patrick Stewart, because we've already passed Geordi, or we're passing him, and we're still focused on Data, and then Geordi's just like, this ought to be a lot of fun, and he says it's so weird.
Yeah, it is weird. I mean, Worf is slightly out of character, but not really, because Worf's been sort of the butt of silly jokes before,
and he gets enthusiastic about things like prune juice, for example, or root beer or whatever. There's
mint frosting,
cellular peptide
frosting
cake with mint frosting. And then, of course, like the
he's
great,
just hilarious,
delicious.
I mean, it sets it up great. The great warriors, the great Klingon warrior. Sorry, the great Klingon warrior Worf is allergic to cats. And so he's like picking up this cat, and he's all like, oh, okay, he's all like weirded out by this cat, and so the joke, of course, there is that big tough guy shut down by a kitty cat
with a little kitty cat.
But that's all sort of that fits into Worf's character. Geordi never gets to be a silly Billy,
Not as often. Yeah,
I don't think he's never been a silly Billy.
In the episode with Vash, when Q sends them to be, he's a little bit silly. But
when he's playing the lute.
Yeah, but you know what? It's still Worf getting the punchline with the smashing of the lute in that episode.
I guess that was a little bit silly. He was the straight. He was the straight man,
right.
but he still was doing something that was comical, and it's kind of like, what are you doing,
Yeah,
man?
maybe he's too earnest.
Yeah,
he's too earnest to get the silliness across.
Yeah.
Just a quick note on notable guest stars.
Call that a callback.
The notable guest stars. This is a crew-centric show. It's a data-focused show, but it's sort of a senior staff focused show episode. But we did have Admiral Nakamura, which he was played by Clyde Kusatsu. And first of all,
Kusatsu.
You will have seen this fella, because
I've seen this guy.
He has, according to IMDb, he has 302 acting credits.
Yeah.
Good for him.
That's one of the highest I've ever seen. He's done tons of movies, tons of TV shows, going all the way back to, he did a bunch of, he did Magnum PI, he did a bunch of MASH, he played a number of different characters on MASH, which a bit problematic, but but he did a lot of voiceover stuff like Avatar: The Last Airbender and Batman Beyond, and he was on the pilot episode of Parker Lewis Can't Lose.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Parker Lewis
That
Can't
show's
Lose.
tight.
That show was tight. It
but-
was such a 90s show.
It was super 90s. He
was wearing some 90s
synchronized
shirt.
watches.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I mean, he played Admiral Nakamura 2 other times in Star Trek The Next Generation. The first time was in Measure of a Man, which is another data-centric episode. And then the last time we see him is in All Good Things. He portrays the role of Admiral Nakamura again in All Good Things. So he's this kind of interesting character who's not like he's like in Star Trek a lot in TNG, but he pops up at a few very key moments, and I would count this episode among them because, it's a pretty classic episode in terms of the imagery and all that.
So how is Data like finding, every once in a while he's finding some new kind of program that Soong made, or does he have them all and he just doesn't feel like trying them until after he's studied them enough or something? I mean, it didn't seem like he studied this program all that much. I don't know. At first I thought it was some plugin some stranger made on the internet.
Plug it in.
But then they specifically say that, it was made by Soong, because, Soong had the emotion chip, right? Mm-hmm. The infamous emotion chip. The emotional chick, the infamous emotional chick. You all know her, don't you? God.
Never.
Just kidding. I'm making a joke. But I'm sure there's been other episodes where he's had some kind of like, program chip. I don't know. Where does he get these things? Where does he get these things?
It's just sort of latent in his.
I think they're latent and they maybe activate.
Jiggity janks.
He just activates them.
He's like, I know there's something in here somewhere, and he's like, oh, what's this? And then
he just kind of digs through his positronic sub-processor. He does a sub-polymer scan to find like all these extra programs laying around.
I had always, I can't remember the specifics, and it could be that the specifics are in a previous episode, but I have a recollection that this and maybe a couple other things were things that sort of activated once he reached a certain level of sophistication, or a certain.
I can dig that.
A certain a certain thing happened. It's sort of like when Sung called him back to the planet and accidentally called Lore back as well. Sung had presumed Lore was disabled, but obviously he weren't.
It's like he levels up.
Yeah, and he makes a sound. It's like the Mario.
He's collected enough stuff in his brain for his brain to do something when it has some kind of dream sequence.
There should
his brain frisbee.
He's got enough material in there for a subconscious.
Apparently there's a subconscious. There should be a game where you get to play as Data, and every once in a while you level up and find some new program that lets you feel a little more human. It'd be a fun game, right?
I would really love to see the game mechanics that would convey that to you.
To the user.
Like, would it be like a HUD that just says like, okay, now I feel slightly sad.
Yeah, right. It's bummed out. The screen would get blurry in some parts now. I don't know.
Like when he gets to tell a joke like that, or like learns how to laugh or something, and then you win.
And then you fills up a meter, and if you fill up enough meters in a certain way, there's a win condition or not, or it's just being human. I don't know. It's just an idea. We'd have to hammer out the details later.
All right. We'll spend some time in the intervening next few weeks hammering out those details.
So Jesse brought up the point about he's got whole room for a subconscious, and that is kind of the whole sort of deal is what made him what made him see these things anyway.
Well,
what are you doing?
That is an interesting thing because why is there this antique telephone that's ringing? I mean, why is it exactly like an antique telephone?
Well, why does he? Well, I was saying how does he even detect the creatures to begin with? How does he detect the creatures? They explain this, but it's kind of weird.
Okay. So we're fast forwarding a bit here, but yes, I did want to comment that as much as I love this episode, if you pay too much of attention, which I did, to Data's explanation at the end, both his
that explanation at the end was weird.
Both the explanation and the solution, none of it tracks.
So one of it was about like the screaming noise to kill the aliens. He basically said, I noticed that he goes, my positronic subprocessor detected high-pitched noises coming from the creatures. Yes. Him making that same noise got rid of the creatures. Right. Why is the noise that they make going to drive them away?
The analogy would be you wake up in the middle of the night, you hear a sound outside, you go open the window, and there's a guy outside your window, and in fact there's a bunch of them, and they're all just going ah, and your response is to be all like ah, and then they just scatter, or more accurately they just phase off into some other universe.
Yes, they phase away. What a fucking weird bunch of guys.
Yeah, so it doesn't. Yeah, that I guess you doesn't hold together. But
I guess you could say it's like a bunch of people going like, "Hey, you stop that!" And then the other guy goes like, "No, you stop that!" And they're like, "Oh shit!" But
this guy's for real.
Yeah, it's still
like when two guys get in a fight in middle school, and neither of them actually wants to get in the fight. They just need somebody to yell at them to like be like, "Oh yeah, all right,
get you." Yeah.
But I'd never noticed it until this. I've seen this episode a million times, but having watched it twice in 2 days, and I started paying attention more to some of the background stuff, like Data's weird art that he has in his room.
Yeah, I noticed that he had his.
He's got some Mondrian.
He's got some square picture. What'd you say, Jesse?
It's Mondrian.
Mondrian?
Is that what they have down at the National Gallery of Art? Do they have a Mondrian?
They have some at the Hirshhorn.
Oh, that wasn't a Data
Hirshhorn.
That wasn't a Data picture, or maybe it was a Data recreation.
He might have been copied.
He may have copied that.
Well, recreation and recreation. Whoa.
You were today years old when you learned.
I was today years old.
The relationship between that.
I was today years old.
Couple things. Starbase, just since we're back at the beginning, the Starbase look cool.
Okay. Well, I mean, are we going to get into like the subconscious, the subconscious thing? Like, how did he see the aliens? Like how? Because
he said he heard the aliens screaming.
Unsavory minor types.
But he would only. Yeah, they were the unsavory minor types, and then Freud was the warning that those minors were bad or something like that.
We'll get to Freud because there's a lot to talk about with the Freud.
But when he says, if he had not had that dream, two questions, and they're related. First of all, I was thinking, if he had not had that dream program initiated, would he have not seen those aliens? Because he wouldn't have dreamed.
I was thinking the same thing.
But
I was
then-
wondering if he would have somehow been weirded out or something.
Like, how would he have detected the aliens? Because at one point, he has a waking dream. Now, is that waking dream a result of his dream program? Or if he had not had his dream program installed, would he have discovered the existence of those aliens during his waking dream? Was that separate?
And it wouldn't have been all encoded like a dream. It would have been just like, this is what's actually happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. It's like, yeah, it would have been something else. Like, how is he interpreting these things? Is this to say that his dream chip brought out a true, like, showed evidence of a true subconscious? It didn't create a subconscious. It showed evidence of a subconscious. Like I said, if he had never installed the dream program, how would this all played out?
See,
Would he have still had his waking dream? Would he have still detected them? All that stuff. Because he found them in his dream.
If Star Trek was were a religion, and you asked that question, the response would be like, just cause. Just cause. It's inappropriate to ask.
Yeah, you just got the real test is if you just believe it when I say it to you.
So this episode was written by Brandon Braga.
I'm not officially against religion, but there are some silliness things.
I am
sometimes.
officially against religion.
I'm cool with it.
I'll announce my position at a future episode.
I think we all know. I think we know your position.
No, it's new. It's more nuanced than you might think.
Yeah.
My name is
It has its
Dan,
purpose.
and I like religion.
No, Jesse.
My name is Jesse, and I put words in Dan's mouth for sport.
I use this voice, and it sounds like this.
Well, that's true. I mean, just because you got some of it right
sport.
didn't mean you get it all right.
So this was written by Brandon Braga. And Brandon Braga, a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with him. He was a longtime Star Trek writer, and he went on to do it and be involved in a number of other things. And so he's very successful by any measure in Hollywood, at least financially and in terms of how many projects he gets to work on and head up. But Brandon Braga, the thing with him always, or the reputation he had, deservedly or otherwise, was that he was quite a good writer, and particularly he was really good at coming up with sci-fi concepts. He was able to really generate some cool stuff that was sort of new or a really interesting variation on something. But that often he wasn't so good with character stuff. And that's why when he worked with Ron Moore, they did a lot of stuff together, and it was kind of, sort of like Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland in terms of the partnership kind of bringing together two important aspects. Ron Moore being very good at character, having a strong knowledge of history.
Ron Moore is Dan Harmon in this analogy.
Yes, Ron Moore is effectively Dan Harmon. And they share a lot of other similarities too, I think. They probably get along. Whereas Brandon Braga was more about the crazy sci-fi concept. But the thing is, honestly...
What if you went to a planet and everybody ate meat and there were people who thought eating vegetables was fucked up?
Yeah, what if, Brandon?
Isn't that like Texas or something?
Yeah, it probably is. It's like a Red Dwarf episode.
But he... I think we have to give him credit here because I thought that the character development, the character arc here was quite good. It was a character piece with embedded within a really kind of cool sci-fi concept. And I think both the character part and the sci-fi part really only work because this is a 7th season episode, because these characters have been developed and the universe has been developed so much that they can use a lot of shorthand, which just sort of gets us at the meat of the story. So that we're kind of going boom, 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 boom. Getting all the things we need, slurping up all them juicy Star Trek bits and being and enjoying it.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do this in a much earlier season. Like it just wouldn't. It wouldn't.
But didn't they all want to fuck each other in the second episode?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but that was because of a
an
virus or
virus,
something.
yeah.
but a couple of times.
Yeah, that didn't really establish their character traits.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one it'd be more difficult to pull off the subtlety of a what's it called? I mean, there's a word for it when you're annoyed by something that's kind of trivial and silly. It's not a big deal. I don't know. There's a word, probably some kind of clever word for it, as opposed to being annoyed by something that is eating your face. You're annoyed.
Being awake.
You're aggravated.
You're aggravated. Yeah, maybe aggravated is a good word. Anyways, it's hard to pull off the subtlety of the aggravation Picard had in that episode. Yes. If it was earlier on, before you could already establish a baseline, because you can watch that and be like, we know what Picard's like. Oh, this is clearly just this sort of anomalous, this sort of representation of a smaller part of his personality, but he's got his shit together overall. That's why this is funny, because we know it's sort of out of character.
The episode and the plot, the story and the plot, both really rely on knowledge of the relationship all these characters have with each other.
Right.
It's very important. I think if you were a non-TNG fan, I should say somebody who'd never seen TNG, if somebody were to introduce you to the show with this, yeah, I'm sure you could get some enjoyment out of it, but I think it would be very hard to buy some of the elements, because they rely on your knowledge of Geordi and Data's relationship, Geordi and Picard's relationship, Deanna's general personality and her competence and all that other stuff.
And even Riker, chuckling because Picard's all annoyed and pissed off, like that relationship. Riker thinks that's awesome.
And Riker chuckling because he gave Alexander a bunch of jazz.
Oh yeah, right.
Pissed off Worf.
He fucked with Worf. Yeah,
Worf was so angry.
It's jazz.
Yeah, but it all fits into their character though pretty well. Like, even so, some of it seems anomalous. It all sort of it comes from what you know about their character.
Plus, the actors just being so comfortable in the roles.
A
real good example is there's the scene right just before Data stabs Deanna Troi,
which is shady. That was really shady of Data to do that.
I
don't think they can really move beyond that by the end of this episode, but they do.
He's partly it's because he's Data, partly it's because it's 24th century, and partly because Deanna Troi is a forgiving person.
I heard about it. It's okay. It's cool.
But, I honestly think it's worth going back and looking at this one scene. I wish I had the time code, but I didn't think to do that. I'm asking you to do something, and I'm not giving you the information necessary to do it conveniently.
Good luck.
So I apologize for that. But the scene where right before he stabs her, she's walking down the corridors,
yes,
and she feels like she's being hunted or something. But before that, there's
touch those isolinear.
There's a few seconds before she does that first. Oh, I feel like I'm being watched. Deanna Troi's just walking down the hallway by herself, and it struck me how hard it must be to be an actor, and how rarely do we see an actor just sort of wandering down a hallway, not thinking about anything in particular. Normally, if we see somebody wandering down a hallway or a path, we have been, because of the prior scene or something, we know what they're thinking about, or we know that they're thinking about, the patient they have to save or the mystery they have to solve. We don't have that here. This is just Deanna Troi just sort of like, la, 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 just, kind of looking around. And it was very interesting to watch her face all the way right up until she starts to get like freaked out and paranoid and starting to look behind her, because I guess Data's skulking around and making little cat claw.
That's what I was wondering, if he was playing some assassin role where he's like, I'm gonna get her, but she can't see me. And he was like hiding around in corners or something. Yeah, I don't know. You tell someone to just act normal, where was their motivation if they don't have any? My motivation is to get to that room over there. There is nothing else going on of importance that people should, of import. That's right. That's how you say it. Import of exportance.
It's an option.
It's an option.
You could say that.
I'm exporting to you.
English
I don't think you
as a language
that.
provides many avenues for expression, and the one that you've described is one.
But they've all done a lot of scenes where they're walking down the Enterprise. So,
always chit-chatting, though.
But you're usually talking with each other.
There's usually some interaction. There's
again,
something going on.
What's different about this, and what may even be unique in Star Trek, I'm not going to claim that, but it may. I will say may, is the fact that we don't really know. We don't have a clear idea. It's not Geordi reading something on a readout and being like, "Oh fuck, I've got to get down to the holodeck," and then then the next time we see him in the hallway, marching down the hallway, because we know what's in his mind. We're like, we know what's happening next. We know what's occupying his mind. With Deanna, we don't really have that so much, because she's the whole point of the scene is that she's just going about her regular business, and nobody thinks that there's a monster android on the loose trying to stab people. So I don't know. It's peculiar, and I totally think it's worth fast forwarding and finding that on Netflix. And it
was like halfway through.
Yeah, it's about halfway through.
It's after the scene where Picard's trying to help out, and Geordi's like, no. It's like, what about those isolinear chips? And he's like, no.
And then Tyler all came in and was like, hey, help me move some. She's like, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. And then she finally helped Geordi out. That was the last we saw of her in that episode.
They don't resolve that.
They don't resolve any of that. It just ends with her like, being like, she's not all that bad. See, Geordi, she helped you. But at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, well, where are you going to go with that? Nowhere, I guess.
You would think that Ensign Tyler is kind of Geordi's type, because she's a junior officer and it's an inappropriate situation. You would think that's right up his alley.
Maybe he was annoyed because he got, his third talking to.
Yeah.
By Riker and Picard.
I've already had my third talking to.
Like the admirals have already called up Geordi and be like, you gotta cut that out, man.
Like the admirals, man.
Yeah, they're gonna be like, this is the 90s. This is the early 90s. We can't do this anymore.
Yeah, ever since the hologram where he made that hologram of what that scientist and like fell in love with her. I think it all sort of had to come.
And coincident with that was the because there's making the hologram was the one problem. And then we also, I believe it was in that same episode, we see Geordi trying to go on a date with somebody on a holodeck, and it's super awkward and weird.
Yeah.
And
is that the one with the pirates playing a violin?
And the thing is she didn't even want that. That made it even weirder. But then of course
that's gonna make it weirder. What is he thinking?
But then with Leah Brahms is like it happens again with the real Leah Brahms because he didn't think to look up her status, and so he doesn't know that she's married, and he's all trying to like hit on her using facts that he purloined from her personal files from the previous. He purloined. Mm-hmm.
That's a good use of that word.
Making use of some of that English.
That was imagery right there.
English. It's going to be very difficult. We have this podcast, by the way. We have this podcast translated into 180 different languages by professional voice actors who are trained to sound just like the three of us. And
I think we got somebody to do it in Welsh.
It's going to be very, very difficult for them to translate purloined.
Catalan.
How do you say?
We got a Catalan.
How do you say "bebo" in Catalan? Catalan.
Blah, blah.
It's probably like pachu pachu or something like that. Gilap. Something weird. Yeah, the scenes where the actors back to that thing where the actors are walking around doing nothing. They should really waste more time in TVs and movies just putting like red herrings of those around, just extra ones to throw in. So when it actually something does happen, it's a true surprise. Because obviously, if you're watching somebody do nothing in particular, some shit's about to go down.
Yes.
Otherwise, why did they show you that? We've so established that rule is like everybody knows that rule. Even if you've never had anything to do with film or whatever, you probably figure that rule out pretty quick. So they should just go the other way and just throw a bunch of boring ass scenes that don't take the story anywhere. So just for that scare factor,
we want more boring scenes in our all television programs.
That makes it more of like an emotional endeavor, because you got pornography. We all know what that's about, right?
Wait. Could you tell me more about this pornography?
Well, it's the old in and out, up and down, left and right.
Up and down, left and right. Gotcha.
What is this left and right part?
Yeah. There's some drinking, some eating. It's a lot of fun. But then that's very similar to like a horror / thriller.
The rural juror.
Because that's all about the emotional investment that you have, the sort of part of your mind that just sort of goes away with itself. Comedies to some extent, slapstick comedy, you could say, has something kind of like that, but anyway, so you take this, you add a bunch of blank scenes, so when something does happen, you're more tickled. You're like, whoo, and it makes a more full body experience. Now, I guess some could argue that it takes away from some of the more No, it adds to that, Patrick. It adds to that. It takes away from some of the some of the more mathematical aspects of telling a story, but
mathematical.
So yeah, just to be a whole genre of just boring shit happens, and you're just waiting till that crazy thing happens.
Instead of ads, that's what they should make us watch. Instead of ads, they should just have clips of people going about their business doing normal stuff, just to inure us to the boredom, so that it maximizes. That's the old rule in drama.
Don't they already have TV shows like that?
I don't know what channel they're on.
It's like the shows about like lawyers and doctors.
The rule in drama is if you want to make someone cry, you first have to make them laugh, and vice versa.
Well, but if the one has to laugh and then the other cry, but you gotta make it do the other. But then you gotta.
Why are you talking?
It's the chicken or the egg. The chicken or the egg. How can you laugh if you need to cry first? How do you cry if you need to laugh first?
I think it can be either the chicken or the egg in this case.
Which is first? How do you laugh without crying?
Which is first?
I don't think it's a chicken or egg situation.
Well, he just said in order to make someone laugh, you
I know what he said. But
it's a spectrum and it's a saying.
It's not an egg and chicken.
Yeah, you start with the mild laugh. and then you get to the bigger laugh.
So what was it? The guffaw or the
the King of the Hill episode?
Yeah, right.
The
right.
guffaw.
Apparently, Adam Sandler isn't funny. Hank's all like, "Well, yeah."
The voice of the teacher in that King of the Hill on this is an episode, sub episode of It's Got King of the Hill, when Bobby Hill goes to community college to learn comedy. The voice of his professor is Paul F. Tompkins, who right now is very famous from his work on Comedy Bang Bang and another bunch of other podcasts and also television shows like Bajillion Dollar Properties. All right, so Troi is good at her job. I think this is an episode.
She's so good at her job that she's not even offended when Data goes to Freud. She's just like, "Come to me first," and then he's
she's
like,
a little
cool.
offended.
Well, she laughs afterwards. She's a little offended, but she's also able to handle it. She gives it a good chuckle afterwards.
This is one of the episodes where Troi is the most qualified to actually, help out.
Well, her advice to Data.
This is right on.
Her advice to Data at the beginning is great advice. She, in summary, she basically says, "Data, let your freak flag fly."
Yeah.
She's like, "Don't be freaking out about this dark imagery, and do a little bit more of it, and tell me all about it," which I thought was cool. I think that's pretty good advice. Although I'm sure she might have mildly regretted it later after he started stabbing her.
Yeah, I just can't. He's weird. Data can do everything. He was afraid he was going to stab his cat.
He was afraid that he was going to stab his cat. Although him watching his cat dream, I love that image because it's both funny.
Yeah,
a lot of the images in this episode are both funny and disturbing, right? So the Data staring at his cat, all looming over him, that's funny and a little bit weird. We've already mentioned, the Riker and Riker straw in head with Beverly Crusher sucking the straw out. Now, here's a question for you. I argue that is the iconic image from this episode. Riker staring straight ahead, talking sort of brusquely, and while Beverly Crusher is joyfully sipping that stuff out of his head. Because, the other major image is, of course, Deanna Troi as a cake getting sliced up, which I also think is an image that sticks in my mind. But when I think of this episode, I think of Riker with his sexy blue eyes and a straw sticking out of his head and just Beverly Crusher just slurping up those peptides. What do you think?
Well, there was
I think about Worf eating the cake.
That's good too. Because he's all like mumbly. He's got his mouth full of cake.
Well, that part with the eating the cake, eating Troi, that of course brings up the imagery of the Tom Petty video.
Yeah, it's like that.
That's like, "You ain't coming around here."
Which came first?
I ain't
the video.
Don't come around here, right? Don't come around here no more. Give it up. Stop. Is that how it works? Go give it up, stop. Is that what they're saying? I don't know what they're
something like that.
But yeah, there's a whole thing where there's a Cinderella kind of, or is it it's Alice in Wonderland. Sorry, and there's a cake and they're cutting her up, and so which would have come first? I would have.
That's much older than the Star Trek.
Yeah,
episode,
I think that would be.
It's like a good 10 years or something. The cake that Worf is eating looks all weird. It looks like a weird cake that you wouldn't necessarily want to eat, but like Worf is yumming it down.
Do you want some? It's delicious. Yeah. She says that. Yeah. Do you want some? It's delicious. And it's a cellular peptide cake with mint frosting.
Yeah, it's like
the mint frosting's got to be extra, right? Because the bugs.
Like, why would anybody put mint frosting on a cake? I don't care.
That's that weird.
Peptide cake, or if it's a fucking coconut
I think
cake.
that is.
I think it's. I mean, I understand why people love it on ice cream. I think it's tolerable on ice cream, but I wouldn't prefer it. But on icing, it's just like toothpaste. It would be like toothpaste.
It's like toothpaste.
I believe it is one of the many artifacts of the late 80s, early 90s, where for people who were not alive during that period, everyone went batshit crazy. The clothes went crazy. The people went crazy. It was a combination of coming down off of the cocaine and getting high on this new boring period of post-Soviet, collapse, where middle-class white Americans all of a sudden had nothing to complain about. So we started singing grunge and wearing jeans and jean jackets and, smuggling 2-liter bottles of Coke into the $3 movie theaters and thinking we were badass because this was all pre-September 11th and the rest of the catastrophes that have befallen our nation and the entire world in the intervening time. But there was a brief period where everyone was just decided to be like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just be fucking weirdos and do a bunch of weird shit like have mint frosting on our fucking lady cakes.
Apparently cellular. So I'm wondering what cellular peptide takes. Lady cakes. Is that what it was? Lady? There was some kind of.
No, it was a cake that was shaped like a lady.
That's not
Oh,
a
lady
thing.
cakes. Oh yeah, shaped like Troi. You're right. I was thinking lady fingers. No, use lady fingers in like tiramisu or something, don't you?
Yeah, you would use lady fingers.
You
in
absolutely
tiramisu.
do. Yeah.
So I'm looking up. So how does mint frosting fit with cellular peptides?
I don't think that sounds
According
very
to this,
appetizing at all.
according to Stack Exchange, sci-fi.stack exchange, someone answered it with cell penetrating peptides are short peptides that facilitate cellular uptake of various molecular cargo, from nano-sized particles to small chemical molecules and large fragments of DNA.
They're like amino chains or something.
It's just things. They're just
Yeah,
cells.
it's just thing,
But
yeah.
where does the mint come in?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't buy it.
So cellular peptides probably don't really have much in the way of meaty, like fatty, delicious meat, right?
Do you think that all this? So again, one of the points I was getting at was that again, the Riker with the straw in his head, the Worf eating the Troi cake, those are all images that are simultaneously unsettling but also funny. And do you think it's because of Data's comedy training program, like infiltrated his dream program? So all his dreams, even his nightmares, have to have a bunch of gags in them?
Well, he was making a lot of Data faces.
Or that's sort of like funny versions of how he sees the crew and how they sort of interact with him, and like Riker's all like, Data, you got like somebody take care of this right now. It's like
This is the sense of humor
I got
you
a
get.
straw coming out of my head, but you better answer that fucking phone.
If you get trained by Joe Piscopo, that's the type of humor that emerges.
Yeah,
when Joe Piscopo, that guy,
I know.
Was he funny? I mean, the thing is, it's hard to say. He was ripped.
Yeah.
Eventually.
I guess he had his moments. Some people became more funny after their actor persona.
He did a good Frank Sinatra.
Sometimes people get funnier after their whole acting persona has been quantified. Like Jean-Claude Van Damme had a brief show that was kind of humorous, and it was all about how he's a washed-up Van Damme. That was a thing for a while. Is celebrities making shows about how they're washed-up versions of themselves. Pauly Shore did it.
Yeah, that was sort of a late '90s and early 2000s kind of thing, I think.
So, but Data being funny, so Data was making a lot of funny faces. He was making a lot of like he got super excited when he found out he had a neurosis, right?
Yeah, or the possibility he might
possibilities
have
of neurosis. He was that's the most excited Data's been. Data shouldn't be that excited about anything. He was smiling. He was like, "Tomorrow, can I come back tomorrow?" And then also there was the part where he was with Freud and the Freud was talking about like how Data wants to have sex with his mother, and now he's like impotence on the top of everything, and he's like, "Oh, there might be a paper on this." And Data's like makes this kind of like weird half smirk, kind of like,
yeah.
He goes like, "I do not believe I am being helped by this session."
He saw through the shit.
Yeah, and he made his face. Oh, and then when Troi catches him and says, come to me next time. Don't go to Sigmund next time. Data makes his little face like, oh.
Well, okay.
Like he's making a lot of sort of, he's got his timing is down. It works. It's funny.
Well, and Brent Spiner is a comedic actor. I mean, he was a comedic actor.
When of course when he's telling Worf about, it's like, tell him he's a pretty cat and he's a good cat. And Worf's like, I will feed him. And Data's like, it's probably a good idea.
That might be sufficient.
Supplement number 45.
That'll be sufficient.
So the Freud thing is interesting from a couple angles. First of all, it's so in character for Data to not even conceive of going to Troi, because Data still views himself as a mechanical man, right? Mm-hmm. He thinks of himself as artificial, and so he seeks out a solution that's an artificial, it's a digital versus analog solution, right? He goes to the digital version of a famous person. And we know Data has a penchant for hanging out with famous people on the holodeck already. That's just something that he's done in the past. Famous people, fictional characters like Moriarty, that it's nothing new for him to do that. That's a habit of his to hang out with these people, right? So it really makes sense in a way, and it is cute when he starts to realize when Troi, again, doing a really good job here as being a counselor, even though she's dealing with a quote unquote mechanical man, is that she's understanding that he may in fact be developing these sort of more human style psychological issues because his brain is just getting sufficiently complex. And it is cute when he likes that.
Yeah, it is cute. And it's funny. And it's not something I think it worked in the episode. It's just kind of pushing the boundaries of what sort of Data's, and that's when it gets to the point of like, how much does one want to nitpick something? If you even consider it like something to nitpick. But if I'm,
And
thinking about it, it's like, that's kind of like pushing the idea of what Data is, but at the same time,
it's also seventh season.
I also don't.
Again, this would have been weird and silly if it was like in the third season.
Yeah. So, the thing is I just, for whatever reason, it worked well enough that I don't really care that it pushed, the idea of what Data.
So here's the other issue, though, with the whole Sigmund Freud thing, because it's sort of a mixed metaphor or sort of
it's weird.
conflict.
It's a little weird. They brought up Freud. I mean, it fits into what they're talking about because dreams and all that, but it's kind of weird that a counselor would sort of invoke.
Well, so
Freud of all things.
Troi makes it clear that Freud is full of shit. Data understands very quickly that that Freud is full of shit.
Did she though say that he was full of shit?
She didn't, but the implication was, don't see magical Sigmund Freud, but it kind of the undercurrent, because she is in the 90s, they would have already understood by that point. It was already well accepted, my understanding in the psychological community, that Sigmund Freud very important to starting the study of psychiatry, but that fundamentally that most people wouldn't go into that because all the mother stuff and everything, they said it was all too simplistic, all too overblown, and those patterns simply don't hold in patience.
I think that it first became known in a late 80s episode of Cheers when Fraser Crane was talking about Freud and his wife Lilith, right?
Was she a Jungian and he was a Freudian, or was it the reverse?
He was a Freudian, and she was all shit dissing on him about Freud. She was like, Freud's an old, is ancient and out of touch, and nobody digs on Freud anymore, man. And that was discovered in Cheers.
Yes,
yeah.
We can rely on TV sitcoms to educate us on these things. But the thing is Freud, he was an important figure, but most of what Freud was doing, he was prescribing people cocaine and doing what he does here with Data, which is trying to trick them by saying, like, the more you resist me, the more that means you need psychotherapy. Right? That's an old bait and switch thing.
Yeah.
And Data sees through that, right? But there's not a problem, but it's a sort of a mismatch, because the entire premise of the episode rests on old style Freudian ideals of dream interpretation.
Right.
Now, other people have ideas about dream interpretation, and they wouldn't necessarily connect them to Freud, but he was the one who really popularized the idea of you can just write down your dreams, and based on your dreams, you can solve your problems. You can figure out what's wrong with you.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, everyone always talked about Freud all the time.
And that is... my understanding, again, I'm not a psychologist, but my understanding from the literature is that is not a very well accepted idea any longer. Not that thinking about dreams and interpreting them can't be, useful in some sense, but that there aren't these archetypical overriding patterns so much, right? It's with the whole, I want to fuck my mom, I want to kill my dad. Well, those are exaggerated versions, largely based, by the way, off of Greek tales, and that was one of his justifications.
Yeah.
It's like, the Greeks wrote about this, so everybody must think this.
Yeah, Freud was talking about some motherfucking in this episode, and also when Data was talking about Troi's body being a cake, he goes, her upper body, specifying the lower body would have probably meant something to do with sex and birth, and the upper body had something to do with probably nurturing or something weird like that. I don't know.
I do believe that Freud also was all about the whole concept of women having penis envy. That women wish they had a penis.
After the line after that was he asked him to describe the counselor, or asked him to. He said, "Describe the knife you used to cut the counselor." And Data's like, "It had a black handle and a serrated blade, and it was quite long." And Freud's like, "How long?" Maybe it's probably that was directly a penis envy kind of thing.
100%. It was a penis joke.
Penis.
Data making a penis joke. But then, of course,
join the Pen 15 Club.
I joined that club so many times. There are so many benefits to the Pen 15 Club.
I was born in that club.
Whoa, that's cool.
Dan and I had to join just about 5 years ago. We took a trip to Sweden. But when Data goes to Troi, I got some also amusing sort of What About Bob vibes when she was saying, I'd like to, see you more regularly. And he was like, daily? So that was definitely very entertaining.
She's not a counselor anymore. She's a lieutenant or something.
She's still a counselor, but she's a she was already a lieutenant commander or something.
Lieutenant commander.
She got promoted.
What's the difference between a lieutenant commander and is the lieutenant commander is like the second from the commander?
Lieutenant commander is like a major, and commander is like a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, I mean
commander's a lieutenant colonel.
Jesse's comparing them to army.
Commander is senior to a lieutenant commander.
Yeah. So I figured that much.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the executive producer is not as cool as the producer or whatever.
Right.
Or the producer puts up more money than the executive producer, but it's like
Something like that.
executive.
But sometimes the
producer.
executive producers are actually the more powerful people, but they just don't do anything on the show.
Yeah, they might not have as much involvement,
But they might be like higher ranked in the
interesting.
system.
Well, so the analogy between military and Hollywood doesn't hold up quite perfectly. In
Not quite, not exactly perfectly. What's interesting about Jesse's comment is that on Enterprise, starting in basically season 3, they have this disconnect. It's really the only time you see that disconnect in Star Trek, where you have Starfleet, which is using effectively naval ranks, and then you have these MACOs, which are a different branch entirely, and they're brought on for security purposes, but they all use army ranks, like major and colonel and stuff like that. So
The Bajorans have that
Yes.
kind of thing because there's major Kira.
And then there was the Vulcan who turned out to be Romulan, who was the Commodore.
Oh yeah, the Romulans all have funky ranks. It's all like
Commodore.
Commodore's a naval rank. Though.
Yeah,
Commodore's what's that? A
Commodore's
rear
a naval
admiral
rank.
or something?
Commodore is it's like right before you get to admiral. It's like a 1-star admiral.
A 1-star admiral.
It's like the equivalent of a brigadier general.
How do you know all this stuff?
It's just stuff I learned long ago.
He learned it in a book.
I learned it from a book.
Did anyone think they must have like drugged Spot up or something that episode? Because he was laying really still at one point, and then
When Data goes to sleep, he's all walking. You see his tail kind of walking around, like next to his bed.
Oh, I noticed that when Data went to bed, he all kicked Spot out of bed, and he was all like laid down and did the yawn thing. I didn't notice the part where Spot was all walking around with his tail.
You just see his tail briefly in kind of the upper right hand corner.
So when he gives him to Worf's just holding him in this sort of way that I don't know how many cats would be willing to sit still for that long. Being sort
It's
of
a
held by
Hollywood
that.
cat. It's a movie star cat.
It knows what's up.
Did they have Spot in the Picard show like stuffed like in that Data archives, or did I just imagine?
I don't remember that. I kind of really hope they did.
Or did they just have like a picture of Spot? I thought there was some kind of Spot like shout out going on. There, like-
It was they
I
stuffed
have
him.
some vague recollection. There might have
Spot
been some
Easter
sort of
egg
Spot
action.
Easter egg, but I don't know exactly. It'd be funny if it was just a
was it-
poorly taxidermy, and it was Data himself who
it
taxidermied
was like in
Spot.
a jar. Or
Looked like
something.
Toonces, the driving cat.
With those arms.
Toonces, the driving cat. I was talking about early 90s.
So did you notice when they? Okay, so first of all, Crusher figures out what, that there's something else going on here when she's treating Troy's wound from when Data stabbed her, and she notices that there's a rash.
Yeah, because she put on the vascular pad to heal the wound, and there was some residual interphasic signatures when she took it off.
Yeah, and so then when she comes to show everybody the interphasic leeches,
everyone's infected.
she goes through. She says, I thought it was this and this, and then, but then, when I used the interphasic scanner, look what I found. And the first thing I was thinking, I was like, oh yeah, just when you use the interphasic scanner, it's like okay, I know it's all justified with the tech speak. It was funny how casual it was. It was like, oh yeah, just always do this. But what I really thought was amusing was she refers to it as an interphasic scanner. But then for the rest of the episode, when they're talking about it, they keep talking about IP scanners.
Yeah, I had to actually look that up because I was like, IP, wait, when did they talk about this? And it's the same.
Why do you think
Yeah,
do you think they just suddenly thought, okay, this is cool? Or do you think it's some crazy behind the scenes thing, like Patrick Stewart just couldn't say interphasic properly or something? So they were like, all right, just call it an IP scanner.
Interphasic.
Yeah, it was kind of misleading because,
It was confusing.
people scan IP addresses.
And then they were talking
It's
about
not the same
IP pulse. And,
thing. It was confusing. And I had to look it up just because I had no idea what point they changed that reference around. And so, yeah, I was confused by that as well. I thought she was rather calm when she pointed it at herself and there was a gross alien interphasic alien
she's a
bug on her.
professional,
She
like
put
Larry
on
King.
Riker's head and then like Picard's neck.
I know, it's all like
gross
just
bug.
throbbing on his thing. She's like, oh yeah, they're kind of like leeches, except worse.
Oh yeah, she's like the leech. Basically, they suck your hemoglobin or whatever. These things eat your other cells, so your body just falls apart or whatever. And like people don't. Okay, if you had enough leeches on you, would it suck you dry?
You can never have enough leeches on you, buddy.
Yeah, I've never heard of death by leech.
I don't think you can get enough. I think it would be presumably it's possible, but leeches are much less scary in real life than they actually
They
appear
don't
to
eat
be.
that much.
You don't even usually notice they're on you, and you freak out because they're on you.
And they're weird.
But you don't feel them, and they suck a little blood, and then they fall
You
off.
just have to like peel them off of you or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, they go on their way, and then they heal you. They put your fingers back on if they get severed or whatever.
I was at a lake in Germany.
do that?
I was at a lake in Germany with the kids, and one of my kids pointed at the water and said, "Look, I found like a weird worm." And I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, I think that's a leech." And then there were some other tourists there, and this guy pulled some chopsticks out of his pocket and just started rooting around in the water, and then picked up this leech with the chopsticks and was all showing it to people. It was kind of awesome.
He had leech chopsticks.
Yeah, well, I think they were regular old workaday chopsticks, but
Yeah, but he repurposed them.
They were, well, I don't know if it counts as repurposing. I think it's just one of the many.
Well, did he go on to put it in his mouth and chew it up?
No, and part of me was hoping he wouldn't, and part of me was hoping he would.
Right.
Were they wooden?
They'd be like Gusher's candy.
They looked to be metal.
Metal.
I think they were metal. I wasn't
Those are
standing right
slippery.
next to him.
It's funny he
slippery.
carries them around with him. Maybe he's used to getting leeches a lot or something.
Or just eating food.
But like on the fly, you're gonna use some chopsticks on some lake leech, and then
I
you're
could
gonna
be
go
down-
eat some food after that.
I could be down with having my own set of bespoke engraved chopsticks.
Would you
that I
like
carry
shove them
around.
up your butt and wipe around, and then go on and eat like a bowl of noodles or something?
Not on a normal day. I don't want to discount any potential futures because
I am not going to stick something up my butt and then go and eat with it right after, unless I thoroughly clean
I
it.
agree that in all likelihood, and if we're talking about pure probabilities here, it'd be pretty safe to assume that. I'm just uncomfortable speaking in certainties.
Well, I respect that.
Unless we're talking about Nemesis, in which case I can be very fucking certain about my views on that. We'll get to that at some point.
I respect that view, actually. So
Leeches are sort of more in like northern lakes, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think they like cooler
boreal
water.
sort of climates.
So these things can eat.
But I don't know. They could be.
because they have more in like Canada.
I don't know. They had
Maine.
There's a scene with leeches in The African Queen. I don't
Yeah,
know.
right. Then
That's a movie. I don't know if that means anything.
And there's some kind of Indiana Jones shit with some leeches too, I believe.
Do you ever have dreams where you're like, I'm thinking about leeches eating blood. And I'm thinking about these IP bugs eating cellular peptides, which causes you to fall apart into a lump of goo because all your shit. I guess it's all the shit that keeps your shit together goes to shit. But but that
The eloquent
all that
words
shit.
that got
of
me.
an American citizen.
That got me. Bartle do. It got me thinking about. It got me thinking about how I remember I made this whole point to try to connect what I was talking about and why I'm about to ask say what I'm about to say, and then I forgot what it was I was going to say.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
no, and I remember. Now it was about cellular peptides. So instead of sucking blood, they suck cellular peptides, and then they're talking about the cellular peptide cake. Back to that with the mint frosting. How
Delicious.
do you? First of all, have you ever had a dream where you're just like at a buffet and eating all this food, and it's like nothing tastes like anything, and it's a real?
I've had a dream where you're at a buffet eating all the food. And I'm just like, Dan, I don't know, Dan. I
Man.
don't know. This is a small business. You're eating them out of house and home. Look at
Wow.
that like old lady in the corner. She's
I think
so
I may
upset.
have had a dream where there was a buffet, but I tried to walk there, and then like I couldn't get there, and
Yes.
and then like my pants fell off. I think I had.
I do think I'm absolutely not joking. I do think I've had a dream where I'm on the way to
Yeah,
like
you're trying to get
meeting
there.
people at a buffet.
when
I can't get there because of the molasses.
Yeah,
The air becomes molasses.
When I was waiting tables, I had a waiting dream. I had a lot of like stress dreams, anxiety, stress dreams related to waiting tables, but only once I had this one where I was waiting at the restaurant and my section that I was to wait on was a mile down the road. So like everything was at one place, and if I had to go to a table and bring in its coffee and all this shit, I had to walk a mile down the road with this tray and give them their shit and come back.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, it was really because all the other ones are stupid. It's like I can't pour this coffee for some reason, and everyone's getting sat. More and more people. I keep trying to pour the cream, but I keep missing. It like doesn't make any sense. But this makes sense. It's like it's taking you forever. There's no hope that anything's ever going to get done because for some reason your section is a mile down the road. Yeah, so
Well, that's the fun part about dreams because of course we can look at them and think, okay, we can get some hints about what we're anxious about or what we're concerned with or what's going on, but there's a limit to that, right? And I remember back in school, it's been a long time since I ever had this. But I do recall having those nightmares where you have this dream where where you're like, oh my God, I haven't written that paper.
Yeah.
And it's due at 6 p.m. tonight. Oh my God, I haven't written the paper.
Yeah.
The problem is I'd wake up and be like, oh no, I haven't written the paper.
Yeah.
Fuck, I gotta fucking write that. So the dream wasn't like giving me some sort of like interpretive thing. It was just, I was just dreaming about being a fucking lazy slacker.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
I would have dreams about like not remembering my locker combination, and it'd be like, wait a minute, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah.
I've never been to this locker before. How do I get in it?
What am I going to do in math class if I don't have my math book?
I know.
Yeah.
I'm fucked.
My math book.
But again, you know,
What a
like
scam.
like we mentioned
Math
before,
books.
this is a bit of a disconnect here in that they at the same time sort of, you know, make a parody of Sigmund Freud, and there's a bit of commenting on Sigmund Freud as this past thing, but then the entire plot relies on this interpretive thing. I mean, that's quite serious. That's the thrust of the plot, is that these images mean something directly connected to reality and are giving you clues to solve a mystery in reality. And I won't discount that that's maybe possible, but it's a bit of a stretch. The out they have here, of course, is that this is Data, and you could argue that Data's dream program would perhaps manifest in a much more literal and romantic sense than an actual human brain, and that might be a difference between Data and his dreams are quite literally more literal.
So the holodeck, the peptide cake with the mint frosting, what did it taste like then?
Delicious.
What is cellular peptide? what did the holodeck? What did the because that's how they got Data in Data's dream, right? Because they
Sounds
put,
like it tastes like shit.
they put his brain into the holodeck, right? Isn't that basically what they did at the end? They linked his brain,
yeah.
so they were walking around the holodeck.
Yeah,
so
that
the
was
holodeck
great.
had to create this cake. What do you think it made it taste like?
Well, like mint frosting. I mean, it's not some broke dick piece of shit holodeck.
Yeah, but that's
it's got the
that's the
replicator.
frosting. But the actual cake is made of cellular peptide. So
okay.
What do you think?
Okay,
Most
fair
cakes-
point.
most
So it just
cakes
tastes
made
like
of-
it doesn't taste like beef or
But
red.
it's also, how does Data know
doesn't-
what it tastes like anyway?
It doesn't taste like
Yeah.
flesh. It doesn't taste like skin. It just tastes like
Maybe that's why Worf liked it, because it
connective-
just tasted like flesh, like
connective-
human flesh.
I think it just tastes like connective sort of cells, you know, that just kind of connect.
It's like if you made a
be
cake
aw-
out of like gristle or something.
It'd be awesome if it tasted like bone marrow.
Connective.
I bet it
tissue.
didn't, but it'd be
marrow
awesome if it did. If it was like a bone marrow cake.
It would be a flavorful cake.
I think you're onto something.
Bone
Maybe
marrow
it
and
human like human refuse,
connective tissue.
human flesh refuse, and that's why Worf was all digging on it.
Yeah.
So this episode was about Data sort of, you know, leveling up and discover. So you'd say this episode was about discovering that Data has a subconscious. It's not that the dream program necessarily brought it out of him. It's just the dream program maybe revealed that it was there. I don't know. It wasn't the dream program. I'm trying to figure out how much this dream program actually had an effect on things. If
yeah,
it
it's a
caused
good
anything.
question.
What did it cause to
I
happen?
was thoroughly entertained by it.
Yeah, I'm not saying I was not entertained. I'm saying it's
My favorite part was when
you not
when
entertained?
Picard answers the phone and he's all like Picard. It's like he doesn't know how to answer a fucking telephone. Like,
Well, Picard does like the old,
Picard here.
Dixon Hill mysteries and stuff. So at least he had an excuse to be like, that sounds like an old telephone, but where is the handset?
yeah, right.
so yes.
It's a ringer on an old telephone.
So we don't know if this dream program never been around. We just don't know if Data still would have had the waking dream or not. We don't know.
What we do know is that the writing in the story was very tight, in that the A story and the B story are at the beginning completely separate, and an astute television viewer and astute Star Trek fan might guess that they might converge, but not all of them do. A lot of B plots are completely unrelated or thematically related to the A plot, but in this case, over the course of the episode, the A and B plots, all of a sudden they start to converge, slowly, and then boom, then you're like, okay, these are related now. And then through the rest of it, the resolution relies on what's going on in both plots. So that, again, it's a very well written episode. Not all of the season 7 ones are. So we can't just say that they've been doing it a long time so they got good at it, because there are some great season 7 episodes. There are a couple of clunkers that I look forward to talking about at some point in the future. But there are definitely a few episodes in TNG that are, what's going on? I don't know.
A few of them.
So Data stabbed Troi, and that wasn't even during a waking dream.
Those miners came in and shot Freud.
No, that was during a dream. When Data stabbed Troi, that was during a point of lucidity for Data.
Well, we could say it's a waking dream because he's stabbing her, presumably seeing the thing. He talks about he had this overwhelming urge to destroy the image he saw.
And
on
that's
her
weird.
shoulder.
Like, what about those bugs would make him want to destroy them irrationally in such a
screaming.
irrational way?
Well, he's the ship's operations officer.
Yeah, but it's irrational to stab another fucking, person on your fucking ship. That outweighs the rationality of, killing this thing.
I think, and Dan, you may, I think you're looking at this quite rationally from a sort of a programming perspective and a usability perspective. It's like, if you're going to put that program in, why not make it have something where it's like, no, this shit's for real. Don't stab people. Tell somebody there's a problem.
What would cause anyone or anything to stab another human?
Well, that's happened. There have been successful and cases of defense for sleepwalking where people have killed.
So it is the dream
spouses.
program. So we are saying that it is the dream program, which is why Data stabbed Troi, because of the dream program.
I think that's what we're meant to see, because the walking cases there's an important distinction. With the people killing people in sleepwalking cases, it's not necessarily because they're dreaming that they're killing somebody.
No, I know.
It's more that somebody bumps into them or something and they freak out and they strangle them or something.
Yeah, so right. And I can see that point. I guess my whole thing was about motivation is how much of this dream program really had an effect on moving the plot forward, and how much of it, when Data discovered these IP aliens, was it because of the dream program?
We are in the difficult position of not knowing the counterfactual, which is if Data had not been activating these dream programs, how would he have reacted? Would he have still reacted in some way or not?
Would he still have had the waking dream without the dream program?
Yeah, and did anybody else get infected by this thing? Was the Starbase having problems? There were no indications of that, but if these creatures somehow
would he have we don't know if we would have even discovered the creatures without the dream program, but at the same time he might have, because it's like, why was part of his subconscious able to detect something that his normal conscious wasn't? It's like it doesn't really make any sense.
If Riker or Troi or somebody just sort of collapsed into a pile of goo, and then they were like, "What the fuck?" And then Data was like, "Oh shit." Now I get it. I've been having this weird feeling all day.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I thought there was something going on, and by golly, there was.
Yeah. It didn't make sense why Data did all that stuff. I don't know. I know it was because of the dream, whatever.
Yeah, to me it works, but yes, if you stare at it a little too closely, there are some potential inconsistencies. And again, getting back to the whole thing, it's like, all right, Sigmund Freud is stupid, but yeah, we'll go with all his dream interpretation because it's useful dramatically.
Yeah, it was.
Which I'm fine with. As I've argued many times in the past, me personally, I respect where you're coming from, Dan. I'm fairly forgiving of decisions that are made when they have a couple choices to make, and they make the choice that makes the drama, part. I mean that in the broadest sense of the term, the dramatic part, somehow more interesting, especially if it's more interesting for the characters involved.
Right.
Then this is an example where I'm totally cool with it. There are examples where it's potentially a problem. Because it's sort of flying so much in the face of what they've already described that it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think I'm getting too hung up on part of the plot that doesn't matter. It's like, it doesn't matter what would have happened if he never had the dream program.
Ultimately, it's a fun little sci-fi tale, and we get to learn about Data in the process. Data, more importantly, gets to learn a little bit about himself. And we see things like when he gives his cat away, that accentuates how important Spot is for him. We already know that, but this is a furtherance of that relationship with his cat that helps kind of round that out. Also, another thing, what TNG, I think in particular, was really good at these little minor things, these little minor progressive moves that they would just sort of insert that had nothing to do directly with the plot. They were just choices they made that you don't always see TV producers make, including in other episodes of Star Trek. And the main one I'm thinking of in this particular episode is when we're in sickbay and Crusher is treating Troi, and working to treat Troi. She says nurse.
And it's a male nurse.
And not only is it a male nurse, it's a giant dude.
It's a big old
dude. And that dude walks up being like, yeah, I'm a male nurse. Fuck you. Being a male nurse is fucking cool.
He's going to hold you down.
Yeah. And that's subtle, but that because they didn't pick a diminutive guy, they didn't pick some, what they were like, no,
Nurse.
this is a fucking giant dude with some Edward James Olmos, scarring on his face. This is a guy you don't fuck with, and he's a fucking nurse, and that's awesome, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, in today's day and age, everyone's totally cool with male nurses, but it was, in the early 90s, that was a newer thing for a lot of people to deal with. And so this is another example of Star Trek providing, in a very subtle side, completely throwaway way, but they took that opportunity to throw, that's clearly on purpose. Not just that he was a male, but they're just like, this guy is like a hardcore dude, and he's nursing it up. He's going to nurse the fuck out of this.
Yeah. Nurse.
It's making me think of when Data was taken in. They had the security crew behind him, with Worf leading it as the tallest one in the center, and they're all three of them during that meeting are just staring down at Data, we're gonna don't fucking try it.
And he could have kicked all their asses.
I know, when they held Data's arm off after he stabbed Troi, and Riker held his arm off. I can only think that Data was coming to his senses.
Exactly, yeah.
Because otherwise,
Data can like pry doors open and shit.
Data can like flick a finger, and Worf would have gone flying, and Worf knows it.
Worf would have like flown around like when you like cut a hole in a balloon and it'd go like. Fire down the hallway.
Frosting.
I am not a merry balloon.
Those organisms appeared to be attached to our epidermal layers with osmotic tendrils.
Epidermis.
Epidermalis. They have osmotic tendrils. They
have a swollen epidermis.
They genocided all of those bugs.
Okay, so that was one thing that was left unclear. Because
he said I think Picard said like eliminated, I think is the word he used.
But it wasn't clear if they were just phasing back to where they were supposed to be or exactly what the deal was. And again,
eliminate is the word he used.
It does not bother me for the sake of this particular story. This is a one-off and it served its purpose. But, as a Star Trek nerd, I'd be a little bit curious to know, where did they come from? Where did they go?
Where did they come from?
Cotton Eye Joe.
Interphasic alien bugs.
Yeah, you think they're phased out from, like in Magic the Gathering?
Yeah.
I don't know if they still
I hope they phased.
It's like they had so many phase counters on them, and you had to remove a phase counter at the end of each upkeep.
By screaming at them? They should have more of that in Magic the Gathering, like where you just have to scream at your opponent.
Point.
Oh, well, that's that. What was that Unhinged or whatever? Wasn't there that?
Unhinged was one of the
Unglued.
Unglued. Unglued was a different one. They had Unglued and Unhinged.
Yeah.
But they turned them into like sort of parlor games or whatever, right? Where it's like you throw your card, and if it touches your opponent in the butthole, then he gets to poop you in the mouth.
One card you had to like crinkle it up into a ball or something. I forget what that was.
Oh man, there was one card that. It was something like...
Didn't you have to do like a flip a coin like 25 times or something and depending on the ratio?
There was this one tournament I was reading about where there was a card where... And I think this might have been before the series. This might have been a legit card where you throw the card and whatever card it's touching gets taken off, gets removed from the game or whatever. So if you've got like 20 cards on the table and you have one card, you throw it and whatever it touches removes from the game.
I would totally miss.
But like
you got nothing.
Apparently the guy in the tournament like tore it to bits and then just like threw a bunch of confetti card and it like got all of them.
What
did
the judges say to that?
I think they let it go. They let it fly. They were like, yeah.
Magic.
Let me tell you, kids, the old days of Magic.
Yeah. So,
1996.
It was like Ultimate Fighting before
Black Lotus.
yeah, it was
Monoflare. I still play with my
SAFTA.
Monoflare. I don't care if they made that Monoflare illegal. I'm still playing with the Monoflare.
Kimbo Slice.
And for the folks in the audience who don't understand, it's okay.
It's okay.
Don't worry about it. Don't get into Magic now. Don't get into it. It's
don't do it, kids.
It'll ruin your life. It'll ruin your bank account. It's a tremendous amount of fun with your buddies, but it will ruin your bank account. But Magic the Gathering, if you want to get any of these jokes, just look up Magic the Gathering and learn about all of its history from Wizards of the Coast onward.
This conduit was manufactured on Thanatos 7 using a new interphasic fusion
you
process.
should actually go out and get a bunch of Magic cards and start playing Magic. That's what
This is point counterpoint with Patrick and Jesse. We both play Magic, and I'm. It's sort of it's like if we were recovering heroin addicts. Actually, not even recovering. If we were just still heroin addicts, and I'm the one saying, "Don't do heroin, kids." Yeah. Jesse's like, "No, come join us.
Fun.
Come join us." So I guess a couple things before we wrap up. We touched on this before, but Picard. It's interesting in this episode because Picard, of course, is often portrayed in contrast to Captain Kirk, in that Picard is not so much of an action hero, and not that he doesn't get into action, particularly in the movies, but for the most part in the Next Generation.
He really liked driving
Picard
that.
gets plenty of action.
He liked driving that car around in Nemesis. That moon car. He was really into that.
In the television show, he was presented as more of sort of a staid, intellectual, kind of an archaeologist, that kind of thing.
Reading books.
Diplomat, reading books. But
except that one time he was sent down to the planet in Star Trek Ninja Gear, and he was in the cave the time that they fucked him over.
Yeah. That time was good. I know the time you're talking about.
And that one, he had to be an action star.
He had to be a little bit more of an action star, and it's also a later episode. But the point being that what this episode does is it counters that somewhat, because while it's true, Picard likes to read, he likes archaeology, he likes history, he's a good diplomat, he likes to avoid violence, but he can handle it.
He's not the engineer.
This shows that he is not some stuffy guy. He has no interest in being at this party. He doesn't want the uninteresting food is probably the thing that stuck out at me the most.
Yeah, that was weird.
Because he kind of the way he said that line was that's important to him. He doesn't want the uninteresting food. He wants to be out there having adventures and exploring things. And so that's why this episode was a win-win for him in the end. It put him through a lot of stress.
Eating meat right off the bone.
But he got to experience something crazy, some new organism. They learned stuff. They added to the science of the world and the universe. And he didn't have to go to the banquet. So everything worked out very well for Picard.
He didn't have to go to the banquet.
But Admiral Nakamura has his eye on Picard now.
Admiral Nakamura has his eye on him.
That's true.
That's true.
Did you notice how... when right near the beginning of the episode, when they're trying to start the warp drive and it doesn't work, and Picard is ordering warp, and the ensign is simply not replying to him.
Yeah,
and it's because the ensign's name was
Tyler
Gates.
Ensign Gates, I believe.
Tyler was the one that had a crush on.
Yeah, Tyler was the other one, but Ensign Gates.
Was an engineer,
and I'm thinking that's got to be the production. They didn't want to pay her the $700 or whatever for having a speaking role. Because all she had, it was weird that Picard was nothing happened. He's like, what's happening? And she's just sort of looking. She's like, oh, and he's like, engage again. And it's like, come on, just give her a line, throw her a few bucks so she can say, I don't know, the helm isn't responding, sir.
Because she's in some episodes. I don't know if she has any lines.
I don't recall. I think she might have some lines in other episodes, but definitely not in this one. So maybe they saved all those lines for Ensign Tyler.
Tyler all had that moment where she was staring at Geordi, and Data was there, and you're like, why is she staring at Geordi? Just to stare at him? That's pretty bold. And then she's like, I need to get this thing. And then she goes, oh, you were talking about blocking. I don't know if that was any kind of particular sort of stage style blocking, but it was very interesting how you don't really know why she was standing there at first, and she just looked like you're just like, wow, she's really got it bad for Geordi.
Geordi already knows that trick about I need to get something.
It seems like she just came in to just sort of stare at Geordi, but then she was just like, oh, I got to get this, and you're like, oh, okay, that's why she had to do that thing. When Geordi was looking at that warp core when it all came up, he was like, it's a thing of beauty. It's like, no, it wasn't. It was just it was looked like it did before, except there's some flashing lights.
This ought to be a lot of fun.
When I think of a thing of beauty, maybe I think of a giant engine with a bunch of moving parts suddenly, or you're looking at this orb that's all going goobly. But this is just some plastic pillar, and suddenly there's lights going up the side of it, and that's a thing of beauty. I mean, maybe he's appreciating. Oh, you know what it is? It's probably because his visor sees all sorts of extra magic that we don't see.
So although they just saw the transition from cynical Dan into whatever the opposite of that is.
But you really have, that's one of those
Good time,
that's
Dan.
one of those things you have to really sort of say well, actually, because his visor, he probably
he's an engineer. Engineers, whatever it is they're working. Think about it. If you build a good gaming PC, and it's got water cooling and all sorts of RAM and stuff, and you turn it on for the first time, and it's all it's all chill. You'd be like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I'm not going to hear that at all when I'm sleeping.
It's just, but I don't know. Yeah, I see what you're saying. And, and I know it's unreasonable for me to say that's different.
We're not engineers, so.
It just looked like a pillar with a couple flashing lights.
You've never put together a warp drive before.
No, you're right. I haven't.
It might be something, man.
I was thinking about that Chernobyl.
Reconfigure the dilithium matrix.
I was thinking about that Chernobyl movie that's about that true story that happened. Apparently,
it's a television show.
Or they're all short movies.
It's a limited series.
They're all long movies, I should say. Right now, anyways, it's the same thing.
It's got that guy.
It's just a different style. It's got that guy. But at the point when he was describing, there was a part where he was describing, the different the process involved in fission or whatever, and there's all these balancing factors going around and how
Nuclear
you can
fission.
and all this
You
stuff.
take atom, you split apart.
You lick split.
You split.
Lickety
you,
split.
You smash and split. There's no problem.
You go to store.
Yeah, sometimes it's problem.
So when he was
One time.
Didn't really happen.
when he was describing that whole process, and he's like, it really is a thing of beauty. That one, I got the message. I was like, yeah, that's crazy. This sort of dance, this balancing act of all these different chemical processes. I don't even really know how that shit works at all, obviously. I don't know a damn thing about that shit, but the way he described it, I was convinced it was a thing of beauty. I was like, that sounds beautiful. But then Jordy just looking at a pillar with a couple flashing lights saying it's a thing of beauty, I just didn't buy it.
I support you in that.
And you can talk it away by saying his visor saw magic, or you can also say like his
I wouldn't buy that argument.
You can also say like what Patrick said. He's thinking about all the shit that went into it. I don't know. It just
it's.
I wasn't convinced. I wasn't convinced.
It's the limitations of a
like,
TV show.
It's like classic internet entitlement. It's like I just wasn't
convinced, so you're wrong. You can go fuck yourself.
Yeah. Go
MAGA.
Yeah, really. But more power to Jordy. He's a good guy.
I will say that I was reminded in this episode, because we see a lot of people sitting at consoles and stuff like that, and having watched, I've been doing a watch through of Enterprise. I've almost finished the 4th season again there. What? Rewatch of Enterprise and Deep Space Nine. We're watching all these shows, and it really is sort of acutely jumped out at me that for me, and I recognize that this is subjective, but I really do think that TNG really had this perfect balance between comfort and utility in sort of the starship design. And I freely admit that a lot of that bias is from the fact that I grew up during TNG, watching it live, even though I'd watched TOS first. That was sort of the main Star Trek for me in my formative years. So that bias being stated, that potential conflict of interest being dutifully noted for the audience.
Doo-doo fly.
The later ships, even in, and I love Deep Space Nine is my favorite series, but even in a little bit in Deep Space Nine and some of the Starfleet ships there, but particularly in the movies and in Picard and things like that. And then when you look at Enterprise and Discovery and TOS, they're a little harder. They're a little harder edged, and you could see that maybe they're more useful from a military practicality sense or something. But TNG really evoked that idea. This is a place to work. It's a place that's functional, but it's also comfortable. It's got nice carpets, and the LCARS displays are all like super nice and wide and chill.
I always
beeping booping.
I always liked how Picard, the captain's chair in Enterprise on TNG, was sort of had a wall behind it, and it sort of fit perfectly into
I agree.
It sort of fit perfectly into the stage appearance of like people behind are raised up, so it worked in that sense. But yeah, he had I don't know, like they always have this captain's chair. It's the middle of this giant room, and there's all this space all around, and I get it, whatever. But he had a nice wall behind him to protect him, and it just felt cozy.
I don't like having some people, staring at my back.
Yeah, really. It sucks. It fucking sucks. But they even had that smooth, they didn't have stairs. They sort of had a smooth runway kind of thing going on, and that whole
that wood,
bar,
that fucking piece of wood that apparently was hugely expensive.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, that big carved piece of wood was,
nice.
That was a very expensive part of the set.
Awesome.
From early on. Yeah.
I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, they made it look real good.
But
now,
it
does look, I mean, for somebody to say like, yeah, it looks like a 1980s office building, in some ways it does, but not really, because 1980s office buildings had a bleakness to them, and there's a warmth and a life to the Enterprise, even though it is in some ways somewhat sterile. But the fact is the Enterprise E was also very sterile. It was darker and chunkier, but it was still pretty sterile, and it did not look nearly as comfortable. It was, and there are in-show reasons for that. I'm not quibbling with the reasons. This is merely a subjective viewpoint that I would probably be very, very comfortable hanging out on the Enterprise. And their bedrooms were fucking kick-ass.
Yeah,
pretty nice, yeah.
Those Klingon, the Klingon bridges were always just, they look like dungeons.
Yeah, those were hardcore.
Yeah.
Now, I'm into the Klingon bridges too, but that's like kind of like, that's going the opposite direction. It's like, yeah, if we're going to do this, let's do it for real. Let's not like, pussyfoot around the bushes or whatever the phrase might be.
Pussyfoot around the bushes.
Yeah, don't pussyfoot around the bushes when you're hunting for lady cake.
Yeah.
Lady cake.
Hey-o.
Hey-o. All right, so
So they were talking about Data's positronic subprocessor. I've noticed that when they were talking about detecting the high pitch, we mentioned that earlier, but I think it was a previous episode, you were talking, one of you guys was talking about how they're always talking about Data's positronic subprocessor. And so
subprocessor.
they mentioned
They
it.
say that a lot.
I think that sledgehammer guy near the end was faking it.
Sledgehammer.
That guy of the workers who, when they were hammering away during Data's hologram dream, holodeck dream, there was a hammer guy in the middle. Do you remember that hammer guy? The hammer guy?
Kinda, yeah.
He had a hammer.
Yeah,
If
like
you
the
wa-
guy from like those guys from Mario Brothers.
Yeah, the Hammer Bros. He was one of the Hammer Bros. But if you watch it, you can tell he's faking it. He's not really. He's like slow. He's doing that thing where he's slowing down at the end, so it's not to cause any real damage.
I just blew through the Medical Police show on Netflix.
Medical Police,
Which is a
Children's Hospital.
Off of Children's Hospital, and there's a gag in one scene where they're running from some bad guys and they're trying to break into a secret part of the hospital. So they take a sledgehammer and one of the characters takes a sledgehammer and starts smashing into the wall, and the other character says, no, you're being too loud, they'll hear us. And then so he's like, oh yeah, and then he keeps sledgehammering, but then you just don't hear it. And it's like such a stupid joke. I could not stop laughing. I was like, this is such a dumb joke, because he was still smashing through the wall. They just took out the sound, so it was more like.
I should watch that show. Do I need to see Children's Hospital first?
I haven't, so no. I guess
Is that's an Adult Swim?
Children's Hospital. I believe so. Yeah. But this one's on Netflix.
Have you ever tried to film yourself like punching someone, but you have to slow down at the end so you don't hurt them?
Why would you slow down?
Why would you not hurt them?
Yeah, why would you just... Why would
You guys. You guys.
Why don't we
Isn't
wrap
that
up this
isn't that
podcast?
the point?
It just looks so awkward when you slow down.
Let's wrap up the podcast.
That's why they
and
do different-
practice hitting each other.
That's why they do different angled shots, but before you know
Why are
how to
you-
do
why are
angled
you hitting
shots,
yourself?
you pretend to kick them, but you slow. They do that in pro wrestling too. Actually, you can tell in pro wrestling when they're stomping on their heads. Sometimes you can tell they're slowing down. It's just poorly executed. I mean, I'm not suggesting they actually beat them up. I'm just saying the hammer was poorly executed.
You're the hammer. All right, so
They should have gotten what they should have gotten is a lighter hammer. It looks like they took a real sledgehammer, but then we're like, wait, don't actually break the set. But here's a real sledgehammer to look realistic, which ironically would make it look less realistic because it's so heavy it could actually break it, so they'd have to slow down. So they should have gotten like some kind of Nerf hammer.
And this is why people should not complain that Rick Berman is no longer in charge of the Star Trek franchise. In addition to the rumored significant problems related to sexual harassment and other things, in addition to that, he clearly did not have a handle on things as basic as sledgehammer technique.
Sledgehammerology.
Theatrical sledgehammer
The
technique.
problem is he studied sledgehammerology when he should have been studying sledgehammeriatry.
Sledgehammer.
It's walked all over my punchline, man.
Sledgehammer.
See, the problem is that he was studying sledgehammerology when he should have been studying sledgehammeriatry.
Does that track? It's late, so I'm.
Well, it tracks with astronomy and astrology.
I'm giving you the benefit of the
Sledgehammeronomy.
doubt that the joke makes
No,
sense.
so
like if
because
you got a sledgehammer in your eye and you get a black eye.
well, there's a psychologist and there's a psychiatrist. They're both legitimate, but an astrologist and astronomist are, of course, one is legitimate and one isn't.
An astronomer.
Astronomist. It's astronomist.
Astronomist.
It's an astronomist and astrologiator. So anyway, so it would be a sledgehammerologist would be bad, and a sledgehammeronomer.
But a psychologist is real.
Yeah, so that's why I was wrong the first time.
Astrologist.
So what I was wrong is the comparison between, before I did the comparison between psychologist and psychiatrist, I said sledgehammerologist and sledgehammeriatrist. And that doesn't work because those are both legitimate. So what I have to do is the comparison between astrologist and astronomer. Astrology and astronomy. It's not astrology and astriatry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you'd say...
Why can't you have astriatry?
You I didn't say you couldn't, but it just doesn't.
We've invented a new form of podcast. I know improv podcasts have been very popular the last 5 to 10 years, but Dan is really pushing for this new thing where like the joke isn't even there yet. We're working through it.
This is a workshopping. People like to be a part of the project.
It's a comedy workshop.
People like to be a part of it. So I say the problem is that he was a sledgehammerologist when he should have been a sledgehammeronomer.
So my challenge to you is, I think you've
Hardly knew her.
Oh shit!
You've workshopped this joke very well right now. This is really good with feedback from Jesse and I. So come back next week
Feedback.
and and just get it out there and
Get
then
it
see, because we'll review some comments, no doubt. So just get it out there. Gotta get that joke in final solid form.
I got to put myself out there. I'll never learn otherwise.
Yeah, feel free to call me up during the week if you need to.
Can I call you really early in the morning?
Yeah, anytime. I mean, this is important. I've got work and all sorts of other things. But
Sledgehammeriatrist, but you could be a sledgehammer optimist.
Optimist. Can I call you at like 3:30 in the morning and go?
you can call me anytime. All right.
You
with
hate
that,
talking on phones.
No, I don't hate talking on phones. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to clarify this because
I hate talking on phones with you.
no, I like talking on phone just fine. We're in an era that if somebody calls you on the phone, that it means something terrible has happened. And now there are a few people in my life who just either they don't have smartphones or whatever, they might give me a call. But for the most part, most people I know, including my closest friends, my wife, work people, if they're calling me instead of texting me or sending me an email or a WhatsApp or something on Google Hangouts or on Facebook, or leaving a comment on Instagram, that means something terrible has happened.
So if you call up the pizza delivery guy to order a pizza, you're afraid he might think something terrible has happened?
I order online.
Why didn't you order online?
I ordered online. I don't call up delivery places.
Yeah, because you're afraid. Because you're afraid they'll think something awful must have happened. It's like he's calling on the phone.
I hadn't considered
He
that.
must be really sick.
I hadn't considered that.
Talk to somebody and be like, I want this to eat.
I think that probably I admit I could have clarified. I could have. I didn't. I should not have presupposed that people out there would assume that I am speaking outside of the business consumer context, in which one would expect you might have to either phone up or receive a phone call. But you know what? I don't like receiving a phone call from those people. I don't understand why the people who come to do their 6-month checkup on my air conditioning and heating system, why do they have to call me?
Send a fucking email.
Send me an email.
Yeah, I don't answer. Everyone knows that that nobody answers calls anymore because the only people who will call you are motherfuckers trying to fuck your shit.
They're pieces of shit. I mean, they're not. They're actually very nice people. But I'm just like, I don't understand why you don't send a mass email to everybody to say, just schedule.
But everyone who calls is a thief.
They're thieving my time.
I'm not even like they're not even
attention.
They're not even telemarketers anymore. They're scam artists. The people who actually call you, like
time chiselers.
All the phone calls are all from scam artists. Because
pretty much.
Yeah, that's why you don't answer your phone, because it's all some person hiding their number
you don't know,
and they're trying to be like, give me money or I'll poop on you.
Anyway, that was some classic It's Got Star Trek off-topic content.
From Plano, Texas.
That's the sort of colorful
More
conversation.
Like Lamo, Texas.
Colorful conversation that you come to expect from this most excellent podcast.
We've patented this style of conversation, so don't copy it or we'll fuck you.
Yeah.
We've been working on this for like 30 years.
yeah, it has been a while. It didn't take us a while. Anyway.
I meant to ask, what's in a subpolymer scan? It's just where all the extra plastic is?
Yeah, it's sub. They just put sub in front of things.
Protoplastic.
It's like underneath his positronic network.
Is it under his skin or something?
It's like
his skin is made
like
of polymer.
Yeah, so it's like equivalent.
Everything's made of polymer.
So it's equivalent to like bone marrow, except he probably doesn't have marrow, but it's something like
it's got wires in there.
It's got wires in there.
His bone marrow has no flavor to it.
It's got no flavor. Don't spoil it.
So I think we that does it for this episode, right? Are we good?
I think
good on this episode? All right.
That's about it.
Excellent. So
egg salad.
Jesse is mollified, and we're all satisfied for having gotten
totally
a chance
mollified, dude.
to get to see that episode.
Yeah, we never gave our opinion on it though. I thought it was fun.
It's one of my faves.
I really like. I do like it. All the nitpicking aside, it's. The imagery is great. The storyline is great. Data's great. The characters, actors,
solid.
It's a good classic episode, and it's a 7th season episode, which there's some ups and downs. There's some 7 seasons has some like super rockin' episodes and some not so super rockin' episodes.
Spider people episodes.
All right, so now for the next couple of weeks, I was thinking proposal. So for the next few episodes,
a proposal
for the next episodes of the show. So we've got Lower Decks coming up, and Lower Decks is going to be interesting for us because we want to comment and follow along with it, but it is also a half-hour show. So what we might do is we'll do when it comes time to do Lower Decks, we'll go over the episodes, but we'll also maybe talk about some other sort of broader topics in Star Trek.
Well, so do you want to do episode Lower Deck every week as it comes out, or we could also do like every other week? But that's not as fun, I guess. As
I mean, it probably might as well just do it. We'll try to target doing it every week because that's probably what people are into. And but we can, we'll
It'll
add
get
on
us
some
more
topics.
downloads.
But I think what makes
it's all
sense
about
is
them downloads.
we've got a couple episodes.
Those likes and subscribes.
Yeah, we've got a couple episodes between then and now, and I was thinking there's two things that might be really smart for us to discuss. So next week, maybe we do a couple more episodes of the animated series, right? So we know Lower Decks is going to be its own thing. It's going in a different direction, but obviously people are going to draw comparisons to the animated series, positive and negative. So we watched the first two episodes back in episode 8 of our podcast, which is a highly recommended episode of the podcast.
Well, they're all really great, though, aren't they,
They
Patrick?
are really great, but I think there's a lot of fun stuff in that one because the animated series is this weird combination of sort of goofy, but also really a lot of really interesting stories and stuff that they could not have done on the actual show because of the animation.
There's a mud episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of different episodes.
I bet also they're probably at a point like where they were like, we don't have to really answer to many people. They probably didn't have to answer to many
I think
people.
they got money.
They were just like, we'll do whatever the fuck we feel like doing.
So I would propose we do that. And then maybe the next week leading into Lower Decks, we could do a little bit more of a general topic because the one key thing about Lower Decks is it's targeted at an adult audience and it's intended to be humorous. At least that's what we're being conveyed with the previews and with the fact that one of the head writers from Rick and Morty is the one who led up the show. So it could maybe next week we do a couple animated episodes, and then the week after maybe we talk about some of the humor in Star Trek and just sort of speak more generally about stuff. Do you have any interest in doing that?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so that'll be our tentative plan. I think next week, why don't we just go ahead and do the next two episodes so we already did Beyond the Farthest Star and Yesteryear. So episode 3 would be One of Our Planets is Missing, which is an interesting title.
Yeah, that was good.
And then number 4 is the Lorelei Signal, which is another interesting one. So I really have no recollection of the plots of those. That's part of the fun of the animated series. The animated series is what got me into Star Trek in the first place, but I've only gotten a chance to see it sporadically until
recently. They showed
recently.
it on Nickelodeon when we were very young.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's what introduced me to Star Trek. Initially I was like terrified of Star Trek. It freaked me out. And then I watched the animated series and got into TOS and then TNG, and that was it for me. That was the end.
Totally.
All right, so that's what we'll do. We'll do One of Our Planets is Missing and the Lorelei Signal from the animated series. We'll do that next week. And then the week after, unless our plans change, we'll talk about sort of the humor in Star Trek, some of the funny things that have happened in Star Trek, and a little bit of talking, sort of in preparation for Lower Decks and beyond. So
maybe some of the sad stuff too.
Yeah. Well, because you got to have the sad to make the funny.
Yeah, exactly. But then how do you make the funny if you don't have the sad? And the sad, you make the sad if you don't have the funny.
All right. Well, we're going to make people sad.
It's one of those questions about the human condition.
We're going to make people sad if we don't give them...
That's what it is. It's the human condition.
If we don't give them the ways to contact us and to participate and interact with us, and especially send us your comments and thoughts and opinions so that we can incorporate them into our conversation.
This is my new voice.
And that's a variation on the Wine voice.
The wine voice.
The Wine voice. Dan
Hey,
likes
Jesse.
to do the wine
Hey,
voice.
hey, Jesse. Hey, Jesse. Hey, Jesse. What are you doing over there? Hey,
I'm
Jesse.
doing the wine voice.
What are you doing? Don't do it for too long or you might get stuck.
So a programming note for our audience.
it's stuck, baby.
Dan is like this all the time. This is
Pretty much.
You're getting full on. You're getting like 80% Dan. He's like Avery Brooks. He actually pulls back for the purpose of performing on the podcast.
I am jazz.
So, all right, Dan, Mr. Jazz.
This motherfucker's jazz.
Wasn't that one of the Transformers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for this,
Totes.
for the purposes of this episode, why don't you close us out with how people could contact us via email?
You can get it at
Where can you get it?
You can get it.
You can get it at feedback at StarTrek.com.
That's pretty good. Feedback at itsgotstartrek.com. And then what about on, social media? That's a thing the kids are into.
At itsgotstartrek.com, which you can do on on Twitter. You can do it, Stuart, on Twitter. And that was a thing from Mad. You remember Mad, that show Mad? It was based off the Mad magazine.
TV. Yeah, Mad TV.
Mad TV.
And they had that one. You, Stuart. Anyway, whatever. I can't do it.
I never watched this.
Stuart.
Oh, that was an Stuart. Or is it something different I'm thinking of? Let me do it.
No, stop.
Oh, man. I'm
Stuart.
Sorry, I'm getting kind of shticky here.
Getting.
Kinda. Blah. You can do it on Twitter. You can do it on Instagram. You can do it on Facebook, but you don't need to because it's not really their thing.
At It's Got Star Trek.
Yeah.
Twitter and Instagram. All right. So that'll do it for us.
And a new and improved webpage.
And a slightly new and improved webpage where it makes it easier for you to sort by series.
Good job, Patrick.
And yeah, we had a lot of work to do on the website, but
It's got a better
we're kind of busy people. So we get done what we can get done, but hopefully that'll help out a little bit. So yeah, check out the website, www.itsgotstartrek.com, where you can get all sorts of information. Nothing particularly useful if you're already subscribed to the podcast through one of the more normal methods, but if you do want to listen to it on the website, more power to you, and you can also see some other things there. So
you can go to YouTube.
You can also go to YouTube. That's a good point. I totally forgot about YouTube.
You're fucking crazy.
I know.
YouTube's got a lot of other cool stuff on it, too.
Yeah, YouTube will just keep
Check
playing
that
shit.
out.
Yeah, you can watch Key and Peele. You can watch That Mitchell and Webb
All
Look.
sorts of cool music videos.
You can watch QI.
Otoboki Beaver.
Joe Lycett's Got Your Back.
Otoboki Beaver.
Yeah, you can watch.
Yes.
You can
You
watch.
should
the music.
watch Otoboki Beaver.
You can watch Matt Berry in both music and comedy formats.
Yeah.
And Matt Berry, by the way, for those who have any interest in at all, has a new album coming out. I think it's called Phantom Birds. Birds. Did I say burbs? Phantom Bird.
He's got
Phantom
some movie
Birds.
with Jermaine Clement or whatever that guy's last name is, Clemente or something. I don't know.
Jermaine Clement, I think.
Clement. Oh yeah, Clement. Anyways, and Audrey Hepburn, Aubrey Plaza. So Matt Berry and Jermaine Clement, which is interesting because Jermaine made the.
Is that one with the crazy title?
I don't know if the title.
Concords guy.
Yeah, Flight of the Conchords.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know what you mean by crazy title. Maybe it's crazy.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my brain because I have that movie.
Tip of my brain. It's tip of the tongue. I think it's tip of the tongue.
No, tip of my brain.
Okay.
My words don't live on my tongue. My tongue makes my words.
But it's like you can't get them off your tongue. Okay.
It's a poetic modification of a colloquial phrase that I'm using to differentiate.
So why say anything? Why don't I just say on the one hand and on the other foot? It's like that.
No,
you wouldn't say that.
No, but you could.
You could say anything.
Second,
I would
why
argue,
say anything if you can say anything?
I would argue that my modification is somewhat more elegant than the one you had, but of course I had time to think of it.
Yeah,
mine
was
you're just sort of pulling it out.
I was just pulling that one out to try to refute yours.
Yeah, and I can tell that you're not even super sincere about this particular argument.
Well, it's just I'm thinking back to the guy that said we were stupid because we forgot a certain.
Oh yeah, that was funny. Yeah,
certain aphorism, is that what?
Yeah, we forgot or misused a certain phrase or an axiom or an aphorism.
It's like something that is very specific to the
And it amused us in particular because the three of us have many deficiencies, but we're all fairly well read in terms of the Western canon and a little bit beyond because we get a little freaky
and beyond.
We like to go beyond that boring old Western canon.
Secrets anyway. of the universe.
That's an example. That's an example of the things that we know about.
Yeah, but so you were talking about the movie. Anyway, I brought that up because
I was trying to end the podcast.
Yeah, I know, but there's a loose thread.
Are you trying to end the podcast?
I'm sorry. There's no. I know you were, and I'm sorry, but there's a loose thread. The loose thread is that Jermaine Clement and Matt Berry. You were talking about the new album, and I saw that movie with him and Aubrey Plaza, and it's interesting because Jermaine Clement did the movie What They Do in Shadows. What I always forget how to fucking say
What We Do in the Shadows.
In the Shadows, I always forget the part. And so he made that movie, but then Matthew Berry is in the show version, which. And obviously it's produced by Jermaine Clement, so they have a relationship, it seems.
I just listened to an episode of, it was some podcast.
And they're both musicians.
There was an interview with Matt Berry, and they said, "How did you get the job on What We Do in the Shadows?" And he said, "Well, I was just hanging out with Jermaine Clement," and he was all like, "Yeah, I'm doing this What We Do in the Shadows show in the US. You want to do it? And he was just like, yeah. He was like, that was it. That was exactly how that was resolved.
That guy gives great interviews, said Matt Berry.
Oh, he's fantastic. And he's a great musician. He wanted to be a musician and visual artist and accidentally fell into acting. And this isn't intended to be forced. I legitimately believe this. I think Matt Berry would make a great guest star on one of the newer Star Treks, because him as some sort of like goofy, hilarious, comedic alien, maybe on Strange New Worlds or something, some alien, the head of a space station or something that they have to deal with. I think Matt Berry would be excellent to spar with Christopher Pike and crew.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, that's a phrase.
I was just ending the podcast.
They say that.
I just ended the podcast.
With just a sort of a banal phrase.
It's not banal. It's just, it has an effect because you're like, whoa. And it gives you a chance to think about all the things that happened over the course of history.
That's about it.
See, Jesse's works a little better. I'm not trying to be overly critical, but just if we're going to analyze this, because what would you say?
It doesn't.
What'd you say about the history?
And the rest, as they say, is history.
So the quibble I have with that in this particular context, yes, mock me all you like. You can mock the facts, but the facts will not wither. Which is that I was talking about a future possibility. And then it's a little bit anachronistic to use the history.
Well, I was going to say it like 30 seconds earlier when it made more sense, but you didn't. But you didn't stop talking, and I was trying to get in on the. I'm not saying this is your fault.
No.
I'm not saying.
I was
trying to get into it in
a fair critique.
I was trying to fit it in properly so as not to make it sound awkwardly forced into what you were saying, but it ended up being awkwardly forced because even though it fit the rhythm of the sounds, those sounds.
The rhythm is going to get you.
The meaning of those sounds did not fit together properly. So, it's not easy. It's hard, all right?
All right, Jesse. So why don't you go ahead and you just came up with a great new end slogan for the podcast. Go for it.
And that's about...
Blah, 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 blah. Of course. I knew that was going to happen. Well, that's about it, folks. I mean, we could say that's derivative of, Elmer. Is it Elmer Fudd or Porky Pig?
Oh, it's Porky Pig.
Porky Pig.
Yeah.
That's all, folks.
That's all.
That's about it.
That's about
It's a variation. It's kind of like like Hungry for Apples.
Yeah.
But then
Hungry for Apples.
But then, of course,
my man.
But then, of course, what you gonna do?
That's a good question. And with that, we will indeed say good night.
What are you gonna do?
To everybody. Until next week. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
He will need to be fed once a day. He prefers feline supplement number 25.
I understand.
And he will require water. And you must provide him with a sandbox. And you must talk to him. Tell him he is a pretty cat. And a good cat.
I will feed him.
Perhaps that will be enough.